Chapter 1580. In just a few days, Xiao Chen gave people the feeling that he had become a completely different person. If Xiao Chen gave people the feeling that he was out of this world before, then Xiao Chen now gave people the feeling that he was bewitching. With his white hair and blood-red eyes, Xiao Chen gave people the feeling that he was bewitching. Although his appearance was still as handsome as before, his temperament had completely changed. Facing such a big change in Xiao Chen, even Luo Li couldn't help but be slightly stunned. It was hard to imagine what kind of trauma a person had experienced to have such a big change. Facing the somewhat stunned Luo Li, Xiao Chen just looked at him quietly without saying anything. After being stunned for a moment, Luo Li came back to his senses and sat down opposite Xiao Chen. Looking at Xiao Chen in front of him, Luo Li's expression was calm, but there was still a trace of shock in his heart. Luo Li actually already knew about Xiao Chen's past. With the strength of the seventh realm, it was not difficult to investigate a person. Coming from the small heavenly Chen continent, Xiao Chen was indeed admirable for being able to come all the way to this point. However, perhaps because Xiao Chen's path was too smooth, this time, the will of the heavenly way made Xiao Chen feel powerless and desperate for the first time in his life. In life, no one had a smooth sailing. Everyone would encounter setbacks. Xiao Chen had been carrying the halo of a heaven's pride since he was a child, but this time, the halo of a heaven's pride seemed so fragile in front of the will of the heavenly way. Luo Li looked at Xiao Chen, and Xiao Chen also looked at Luo Li. Those blood-red eyes seemed to be able to suck people's souls, making people unable to help but be absent-minded. Their eyes met, and in the end, it was Luo Li who spoke first. He took out a necklace from his arms and placed it in front of Xiao Chen. This necklace was nothing special. It was just composed of 12 thumb-sized black beads. It looked very ordinary. However, when he saw this necklace, Xiao Chen's eyes changed. He took the necklace without hesitation. That's right, this necklace contained the remnant souls of Qin Shuru and others. Each bead represented a person's remnant soul. Qin Shuru by Hua Fairy, Gu Lingyao, Tian Yu, Xiao Qing, by Ryue, Qing Yao, Qing Luo, Fei Mei, Anlan, Lu Zhu and Si Ju. 12 people, exactly 12 beads. This necklace was personally refined by Luo Li. It only had one function, and that was to preserve everyone's remnant souls and not let them dissipate. Holding the necklace in his hand, Xiao Chen could clearly feel everyone's aura. Unknowingly, Xiao Chen's eyes became moist again. Xiao Chen also gently placed the necklace on his chest. This necklace was Xiao Chen's family. Being able to feel the aura of Qin Shuru and the other 2 women, as well as Xiao Qing and Bai Ryue, Xiao Chen tightly pressed the necklace to his chest, as if he wanted to feel the warmth of his family. Seeing Xiao Chen's appearance, Luo Li said indifferently, "This necklace guarantees that their remnant souls will not dissipate. However, if you want to use this remnant soul to revive them, you will need the origin power of the will of the heavenly way. In other words, if you want to revive your family, the only way is to kill the will of the heavenly way." If he wanted to revive Qin Shuru and the others, he could only use the origin power of the will of the heavenly way. Only by killing the will of the heavenly way could everyone be revived. Xiao Chen ignored Luo Li's words. He still held the seemingly ordinary necklace tightly in his hand and looked at Luo Li without replying. Seeing this, Luo Li asked, "What do you think, Xiao Chen? Are you willing to become the heir of the 7th realm?" Luo Li was not a hesitant person. He had saved Xiao Chen so that he could become the heir of the 7th realm. There was still a chance that Qin Shuru and the other women could be revived. This way, Xiao Chen also had hope in his heart. Although he had to kill the will of the heavenly way to revive Qin Shuru and the others, Xiao Chen would not even frown if he had to kill all living beings, let alone kill the will of the heavenly way. If Xiao Chen could not even protect his own family, did he still have to care about good and evil? Seeing hope, Xiao Chen's shattered state of mind began to show signs of recovery. As long as he could revive Qin Shuru and the others, Xiao Chen would not give up. However, after this incident, Xiao Chen had clearly changed greatly. Xiao Chen stared at Luoli with his blood-red eyes. After a while, he said, "Okay." Although it was just a simple word, the voice was extremely indifferent, without the slightest trace of emotion. Xiao Chen agreed to Luoli's invitation. The reason was simple. To revive Qin Shuru and the others, he had to rely on the power of the Hachibra Senkai and Luoli. To the people of the Seventh Wilderness, the Seventh Realm was evil and a group of villains. However, this was nothing to Xiao Chen now. Not to mention a group of villains, even if they were demons, Xiao Chen would not hesitate to cooperate with them as long as they could revive Qin Shuru and the others. He would even sell his soul. Since he could not even protect his own family, how could Xiao Chen care about other things? The difference between good and evil was no longer important to Xiao Chen now. So what if they were demons? As long as he could revive his family, it did not matter even if Xiao Chen became a demon. Seeing Xiao Chen nod, Luoli's smile became even brighter. He smiled and nodded. "Welcome to the Hachibra Senkai." Luoli naturally thought highly of Xiao Chen. No matter how one looked at it, Xiao Chen was stronger than Yu Shujin. Such a peerless genius was the heir apparent the Seventh Realm needed. After chatting with Xiao Chen for a while, Luoli told Xiao Chen that he would arrange for Xiao Chen to meet the other strong cultivators of the Seventh Realm tomorrow. Xiao Chen did not really care about the heir apparent of the Seventh Realm, so he did not pay much attention to Luoli's words. He kept looking at the necklace in his hand as if it was all he had. Seeing this, Luoli did not stay for long and quickly left. After Luoli left, Xiao Chen still stared at the necklace in his hand. Yes, this seemingly ordinary necklace was all that Xiao Chen had. From it, Xiao Chen could feel the aura of his family. He pressed the necklace against his heart as if he wanted to feel more warmth from it. His blood-red eyes were filled with tenderness and determination. After a while, Xiao Chen murmured to himself, "Don't worry, I will definitely revive you. Please collect, vote, recommend." Chapter 1581. Reviving his family had become Xiao Chen's only motivation to continue living. Xiao Chen's heart had already given up after this blow. However, when he learned from Luoli that there was a way to revive his family, a glimmer of hope appeared in Xiao Chen's heart. What people feared the most was having no hope. If a person had no hope for the future, there was no meaning in living. Now, Xiao Chen had found a reason to continue living, which was to revive his family. In order to achieve this goal, Xiao Chen could give up anything. Good and evil, black and white, good and evil. These were no longer important to Xiao Chen. If he couldn't even protect his family, how could Xiao Chen have the time to care about these things? Moreover, after today's incident, Xiao Chen's mentality had completely changed. Now, in Xiao Chen's eyes, good and evil were simply jokes. The only thing he could trust was the sword in his hand. From now on, no matter who tried to stop him, he would only kill them with his sword. Reviving his family was Xiao Chen's only goal. No one could stop him from achieving this goal. He swore in his heart. Then, Xiao Chen hung the necklace around his neck. In this way, Xiao Chen could feel a trace of warmth. Live on in order to revive his family. Moreover, Xiao Chen would never let such a thing happen again. Xiao Chen didn't want to experience that kind of helplessness and despair again. Therefore, he had to become stronger. He had to be so strong that even the heavens and earth feared him. A surge of coldness burst out of his eyes. After this huge change, Xiao Chen was indeed a completely different person from before. After a silent night, early the next morning, a powerful figure in the immortal realm from the Seventh Realm knocked on Xiao Chen's door and said respectfully, "Your Excellency, it's time." Today was the day that Luoli would announce that Xiao Chen had become the heir of the Seventh Realm. As the powerful figure spoke, the door was opened. Then, Xiao Chen walked out in a white robe. It was still the white robe that Xiao Chen loved to wear, but at this time, It felt completely different from before. With snow-white skin, snow-white hair, and a pair of blood-red eyes, Xiao Chen gave off an incomparably demonic feeling. He didn't reveal any aura. Facing Xiao Chen, he didn't know why, but he felt a trace of nervousness and fear. Xiao Chen was in the immortal realm, and this person was also in the immortal realm. However, in front of Xiao Chen, he actually felt terrified and nervous. He didn't know why he had such a feeling, but it was precisely because of this that he naturally spoke to Xiao Chen respectfully. It's time to go." Naturally, he behaved respectfully to Xiao Chen. In response, Xiao Chen didn't even look at him. He said indifferently, "Lead the way." Such a tone and attitude would never appear on Xiao Chen before, although Xiao Chen used to be indifferent too. However, Xiao Chen's indifference now was indifference to the world and everything in the world. It was as if he didn't care about anything at all. Even if the world collapsed, Xiao Chen wouldn't care. What kind of attitude did a person have to be so indifferent to everything in the world? Xiao Chen did not say anything else as soon as he finished speaking. The immortal from the seventh realm respectfully led the way all the way to the main hall. It wasn't a secret in the seventh realm that Luoli was going to announce Xiao Chen as the heir of the seventh realm. Many people knew about it. However, many people actually didn't accept Xiao Chen. After all, Xiao Chen used to be the pride of the seventh wilderness. Now, he had become the heir of the seventh realm as soon as he joined the seventh realm. How could they accept this? Even if Xiao Chen had defeated Yu Shujin and obtained the power of all living beings, so he was now in the immortal realm, so what? After all, Xiao Chen didn't contribute anything to the seventh realm. How could they accept a person who didn't contribute anything to the seventh realm suddenly becoming the heir of the seventh realm? At this moment, thousands of people had gathered in the main hall. It could be said that almost all the strong figures in the seventh realm had gathered here. As mentioned before, the Hachibra Senkai was different from other forces. They had high requirements for recruiting members. The weakest member had to be in the immortal realm. Of course, the younger generation didn't count. Moreover, the younger generation in the Hachibra Senkai were almost all the descendants of the strong figures of the older generation. Therefore, they were born in the Hachibra Senkai. There were less than 1,000 strong figures in the seventh realm. Including the younger generation, there were about 2,000 people. Basically, all of them had gathered in the main hall. They gathered in groups of 3 or 5. Because Xiao Chen and Luoli hadn't shown up yet, they behaved very casually. Of course, this had something to do with the atmosphere of the seventh realm. As the realm lord of the seventh realm, Luoli rarely punished his subordinate. He was also very easygoing. In addition, there weren't many rules in the seventh realm. Therefore, the members of the seventh realm behaved very casually as long as it wasn't a formal occasion. Luoli had never scolded them. The strong figures of the older generation didn't have much opinion about Xiao Chen becoming the heir of the seventh realm. Although they were unhappy, they couldn't do anything about it since Luoli had already decided. However, compared to their parents, the younger generation of geniuses did not think so. In the northern underworld fairyland, almost all the young talents of the seventh realm had seen Xiao Chen and witnessed Xiao Chen's strength with their own eyes. To be honest, they acknowledged Xiao Chen's strength. However, strength and prestige were two different things. Xiao Chen had just joined the seventh realm. It could be said that among the young talents, Xiao Chen didn't have any prestige at all. Therefore, these young talents naturally didn't want Xiao Chen to become the heir of the seventh realm. The young talents were very conflicted about this matter. Xiao Chen and Luoli hadn't shown up yet. More than a dozen talents gathered around Yu Shujin. They were all Yu Shujin's loyal followers. They were also the group of people who disliked Xiao Chen the most. Looking at Yu Shujin, a beautiful girl said in a coquettish voice, "Brother Shujin, why should Xiao Chen be the heir of the seventh realm? I really don't know what the realm lord is thinking." This girl was very beautiful. Even in the seventh wilderness, she would be a first-class beauty. Judging from the love in her eyes when she spoke, it was obvious that she adored Yu Shujin. Perhaps it was because of this that she disliked Xiao Chen very much. Even though she had never interacted with Xiao Chen before, she still bore a grudge against him. Please collect, vote, recommend. Chapter 1582. She didn't want Xiao Chen to become the heir of the seventh realm at all. Hearing her words, the prides from the seventh realm around her all chimed in. That's right. Only Brother Shujin is qualified to be the heir of the seventh realm. No one else is qualified. These geniuses were all Yu Shujin's lackeys. Therefore, they naturally stood on her side. However, upon hearing these words, Yu Shujin did not say anything. Although her face remained calm, she was feeling extremely bitter in her heart. Previously, he'd lost to Xiao Chen in the northern underworld celestial realm. His confidence had already been damaged. Now, Xiao Chen must have gotten the power of living beings. In this way, Xiao Chen had already entered the immortal realm, while Yu Shujin was still at the lesser completion of the secondary saint realm. The gap between them had been completely widened. What right did Yu Shujin have to compete with Xiao Chen for the heir's position? Moreover, as the former heir of the seventh realm, Yu Shujin could guess some of Luo Li's thoughts. Now, except for the seventh realm, the other heirs of the Hachibra Senkai had all entered the immortal realm and formed the heavenly immortal mansion. Only Yu Shujin, the heir of the seventh realm, couldn't form the heavenly immortal mansion and enter the immortal realm because he still couldn't get the power of living beings. Without forming the heavenly immortal mansion and reaching the immortal realm, Yu Shujin wasn't qualified to be the heir of the seventh realm anymore. Compared to the other 7 heirs of the Hachibra Senkai, Yu Shujin wasn't qualified to be the heir of the seventh realm anymore. Now that Xiao Chen had gotten the power of living beings, formed the heavenly immortal mansion, and reached the immortal realm, he was indeed the most suitable person to be the heir of the seventh realm. To be honest, Yu Shujin didn't have much attachment to the heir of the seventh realm anymore. Since he could become the heir of the seventh realm, Yu Shujin wasn't someone who couldn't let go. Since Xiao Chen was stronger than him and had gotten the power of living beings, it was natural for him to become the heir of the seventh realm. Ignoring the words of the people around him, Yu Shujin actually felt relieved in his heart. It had to be said that Yu Shujin's state of mind was indeed not bad. Just by having such a state of mind, Yu Shujin's future achievements would not be low. As the geniuses gathered around Yu Shujin and discussed, Xiao Chen was led into the hall by the seventh realm's immortal realm expert. When they saw Xiao Chen appear, everyone's gaze naturally turned towards Xiao Chen. After all, many of them had never seen Xiao Chen before. Naturally, they were curious about Xiao Chen. Compared with the others, the young geniuses from the seventh realm were all shocked when they saw Xiao Chen. Everyone couldn't help but look shocked, including Yu Shujin. They had seen Xiao Chen in the northern underworld immortal realm, but how long had it been? Less than half a month? How did Xiao Chen become like this? His hair was white, and his eyes had turned from black to blood red. If it weren't for the fact that his appearance hadn't changed, perhaps they wouldn't have recognized him as Xiao Chen. They didn't know what had happened to Xiao Chen. After all, it was a secret. If Lu Li didn't mention it, not many people would know about it. Not only had his appearance changed drastically, but his temperament had also changed. That's right. Xiao Chen gave off an indifferent feeling, as though he was indifferent to everything. Is he really Xiao Chen? At that moment, someone couldn't help but ask. It couldn't be helped. It was entirely because Xiao Chen had changed too much. They couldn't believe that it was the same person. Yu Shujin knitted her brows and a strange glint flashed in her eyes. She stared fixedly at Xiao Chen. While she was shocked, she was also puzzled. What could have happened to make a person undergo such a drastic change in such a short period of time? Ignoring everyone's gazes, Xiao Chen strode directly to the center of the hall. Because Lu Li hadn't arrived yet, everyone could only wait. Xiao Chun didn't intend to greet anyone at all. He just stood there quietly, as though everything around him had nothing to do with him. Xiao Chun was indifferent. But to everyone's surprise, Yu Shujin took the initiative to approach Xiao Chun and said with a smile, "Xiao Chun, we meet again." There wasn't the slightest hostility on her face. Thinking about it, Yu Shujin didn't even care about the air seat. Obviously, she wouldn't hold a grudge against Xiao Chun. Yu Shujin's state of mind was indeed very good. At least, the other experts of the older generation present secretly nodded their heads and praised him. However, in the face of Yu Shujin's initiative to greet him, Xiao Chun only nodded slightly. He didn't even say a word. His attitude was extremely cold. Yu Shujin didn't expect Xiao Chun's indifference. But what made him more curious was what had happened to Xiao Chun. Why had brother Xiao Chun changed so much? He wanted to ask, but he didn't know where to start. Moreover, to put it bluntly, Yu Shujin, wasn't very familiar with Xiao Chun. It didn't seem appropriate to ask directly like this. After giving it some thought, Yu Shujin decided to give up. She shook her head with a bitter smile and was about to retreat to the side. However, just as Yu Shujin was about to leave, her followers were unwilling to let her go, especially the young lady who spoke to Yu Shujin earlier. They already hated Xiao Chun because Xiao Chun had stolen Yu Shujin's air seat. Now that Yu Shujin had taken the initiative to greet Xiao Chun had only nodded slightly. This made them even more unhappy. "Xiao Chun, don't go overboard. Brother Shujin has already forgiven you, yet you're still ignoring him. What is the meaning of this?" The pretty girl shouted without hesitation, "Xiao Chun, don't go overboard. Brother Shujin has already forgiven you." The girl was angry purely because Xiao Chun ignored Yu Shujin. However, Xiao Chun didn't seem to care about the girl's scolding at all. There was no color in his blood-red eyes. He didn't care at all. It could even be said that he was ignoring her. Seeing this, the girl became even more anxious. But at this time, before she could say anything, a young genius beside her said angrily, "You're so self-righteous. You were born with a mother but didn't teach you anything." Xiao Chun looked at the young man as soon as he finished speaking. He had only muttered under his breath at first, but Xiao Chun immediately turned to look at the young man. Being locked on by Xiao Chun's blood-red eyes, the young man didn't know why, but he felt as if he had fallen into an abyss. He couldn't help but shudder. How could there be such a gaze in the world? There was no anger at all. However, what the young genius didn't expect was that when Xiao Chun looked at him, without any warning, the dustless sword appeared in his hand. Then, he slashed at the young man. "Begging for your collection, begging for monthly votes, begging for recommendation." Chapter 1583. No one had expected that Xiao Chun would suddenly attack. Moreover, it was obvious that Xiao Chun did not hold back at all. It was obvious that he intended to kill the young man with one strike. The blood-red sword blade was filled with strong killing intent. Looking at the sudden scene, the other experts of the seventh realm frowned. Some of them even couldn't help but say, "What's wrong with you? What a strong killing intent. This guy has a strong killing intent." At that moment, Xiao Chun's sword was filled with extremely dense killing intent. There was nothing else other than that. Furthermore, even the original golden spiritual power had turned blood-red at that moment, as if it wanted to kill all living things in the world. An expert of the older generation murmured softly. It was worth noting that even old monsters like them, who had lived for who knows how many years, could not have such a strong killing intent like Xiao Chun's. They really did not know how Xiao Chun had cultivated his killing intent. However, now was not the time to talk about this. Xiao Chun attacked without saying a word. At this moment, facing Xiao Chun's sword, that young genius was already scared out of his wits. Xiao Chun's killing intent was so strong that it was enough to affect the young genius's mind. Facing this demonic blood-red sword, the young genius was directly killed. He was only at the beginning of the quasi-saint realm, while Xiao Chen was now at the immortal realm. With Xiao Chen's strength, it was indeed not difficult for him to kill this young genius. The blood-red blade sliced through the air. Just when the young genius thought that he was about to die, a voice suddenly appeared in front of the young man. He did not seem to have done anything, but he simply waved his hand and shattered Xiao Chen's sword attack. The person who suddenly attacked was a white-haired old man with a kind face. After blocking the sword for the young genius, the old man looked at Xiao Chen and said indifferently, "Little guy, it's not good to have such a strong killing intent at such a young age." The old man was obviously an expert from the 7th realm. Hearing his words, Xiao Chen glanced at him indifferently with his blood-red eyes. Then, he withdrew his gaze and ignored him. However, he did not continue to attack. Xiao Chen's attitude was extremely indifferent. That young genius dared to use his mother as an excuse, and Xiao Chen had indeed intended to kill him. However, with the elder making his move, Xiao Chen knew that he would not be able to succeed that day. Since that was the case, there was no need to waste any more words. Xiao Chen could not see through the old man's specific cultivation, but he was sure that the old man's cultivation was definitely beyond the immortal realm. In fact, it was far beyond the immortal realm. Xiao Chen had condensed the heavenly immortal mansion and broken through to the immortal realm, but he did not think that he had the strength to do whatever he wanted in the 7th realm. After all, if a mighty figure in the immortal realm could do whatever he wanted in the 7th realm, then the 7th wilderness would not be helpless against the 7th realm. Xiao Chen was still not strong enough to face the experts of the older generation in the 7th realm. After all, these people were old monsters who had lived for countless years. Many of them had existed since the Antiquity Age and the Archean Age. Of course, apart from the older generation, Xiao Chen's strength was definitely at the top of the younger generation. He could absolutely crush them. Seeing Xiao Chen withdraw his gaze without saying a word, the old man did not say anything more. However, in his heart, the old man still felt that Xiao Chen's killing intent was too strong. At such a young age, he already had such a strong killing intent. Moreover, Xiao Chen's strength was so terrifying. The old man really did not know what this boy would become in the future. Perhaps he would become a demon who slaughtered others. Shaking his head gently, the old man slowly walked away. Since Xiao Chen did not make any more moves, it was obvious that he would not bully Xiao Chen either. Although he survived, the young genius was still in a daze. He had really felt the breath of death just now. If this was not the palace of the 7th realm, he had no doubt that Xiao Chen's sword would have killed him here. He was completely stunned by Xiao Chen. At this time, the geniuses who had opposed Xiao Chen becoming the heir of the 7th realm all shut their mouths obediently. What a joke! Who would pull out a sword and kill someone just because of a disagreement? Besides, they were in the main hall of the 7th realm. Almost all the experts of the 7th realm were gathered here. On such an important occasion, it was really unheard of for Xiao Chen to pull out a sword and kill someone just because of a disagreement. The young geniuses of the 7th realm were all stunned by Xiao Chen's actions. As for the older experts, most of them thought that Xiao Chen's strong killing intent was not a good thing. If he had such a strong killing intent at such a young age, it was very likely that his mind would be devoured by his killing intent in the future. Most of the older experts did not agree with such a person becoming the heir of the 7th realm. At first, many people did not think much of Xiao Chen becoming the heir of the 7th realm. After all, Xiao Chen's talent and strength were obvious. Moreover, since he had joined the Hachibra Senkai, it was not a big deal for him to become the heir of the 7th realm. However, after seeing Xiao Chen's strong killing intent, most people thought that Xiao Chen was not suitable to become the heir of the 7th realm. As the leader of the younger generation, the heir of the 7th realm would definitely enjoy great treatment. In the 7th realm, the status of the heir of the 7th realm was only below that of Luoli, the realm lord. If such an important position was given to someone with such a strong killing intent, it would not be a good thing. Many of the older experts thought to themselves. They thought that when Luoli came later, they would definitely persuade the Realm Lord to change his mind. Shao Chun did not know what the people around him were thinking. Of course, he was not interested in knowing. Moreover, Shao Chun did not care about the so-called heir of the seventh realm. They all felt that their killing intent was very strong, but who knew what had happened to Shao Chun? If they had encountered the same thing, their killing intent would not be much weaker than Shao Chun's. As for the so-called heir of the seventh realm, in Shao Chun's eyes, it was worthless. Shao Chun had once been known as the first saint of the seventh wilderness, but so what? It was just a false reputation. When faced with the will of the heavenly way, Shao Chun, the first saint of the seventh wilderness, was still so powerless and so desperate. In the end, he could not even protect his family. Therefore, Shao Chun did not care about the so-called heir of the seventh realm, because it was just a false reputation. If a real expert wanted to kill you, what could you do even if you were an heir of the seventh realm? Exuding endless coldness, Shao Chun ignored everyone. No one dared to approach Shao Chun. The younger generation was completely stunned by Shao Chun. The older generation thought that Shao Chun was too murderous and did not want to have too much contact with him. Please add vote recommend. Chapter 1584. No one came forward to talk to Shao Chun. Only Shao Chun stood alone in the center of the hall. However, Shao Chun didn't care about this at all. To be honest, Shao Chun wasn't in the mood to pay attention to these people. Obviously, the people of the seventh realm all thought that Shao Chun was a murderous man who had drawn his sword to kill without saying a word, and his killing intent was so strong. No one dared to provoke Shao Chun anymore. The young geniuses also shut their mouth. Only Yu Shujin looked at Shao Chun thoughtfully. No one knew what she was thinking. Everyone waited like this, and the atmosphere in the hall became a little depressing. Fortunately, Luoli soon appeared in the hall. Luoli glanced at Shao Chun, who was standing alone in the center of the hall, and then at everyone present. He smiled and said, "Sorry for being late." It had to be said that Luoli, the realm lord of the seventh realm, was indeed very approachable. However, after hearing his words, an expert of the older generation stood up and said, "Realm Lord, I have something to say about the selection of the heir apparent." Hearing this, Luoli's face didn't change at all. He still smiled and said, "Oh, let's hear it. I don't think Shao Chun is suitable to be the heir apparent of the seventh realm. He's too murderous and has just joined the seventh realm. How can he be the heir apparent of the seventh realm?" Hearing this, the expert of the older generation said bluntly. Many people subconsciously looked at Shao Chun as soon as he said that. They were secretly relieved when they saw that Shao Chun did not react at all. Many of them were afraid that Shao Chun would draw his sword and kill again if he did not agree with them. Little did they know that Shao Chun did not care about the so-called heir of Kunlun Field at all. In fact, he did not care about it at all. Shao Chun completely ignored the elder. He did not say a word and did not even look at him. At the same time, Luoli's expression did not change in the slightest when he heard this. He swept his gaze across the crowd and said calmly, "Don't worry, Shao Chun, don't worry. What about you guys? Don't you agree?" He asked for the opinions of the others. Seeing this, everyone present nodded silently. It was obvious that they agreed with him. Everyone didn't agree with Shao Chun becoming the heir apparent of the seventh realm. Facing this scene, Luoli didn't get angry, nor did he scold them. He still smiled and said, "You think that Shao Chun is unconvinced because he just joined the seventh realm and became the heir apparent. But let me ask you, is there anyone else in the seventh realm other than Shao Chun? Hachiba Senkai, the heirs of the other realms have all received the power of living beings, broken through the immortal realm, and condensed the heavenly immortal mansion. In the seventh realm, only Shao Chun has met this requirement. If Shao Chun doesn't become the heir apparent, is there anyone else in the younger generation? The heir apparent of the seventh realm represents the face of the seventh realm. When the Hachibra Senkai gathers in the future, if the heir apparent of the seventh realm hasn't even reached the immortal realm, it will be a joke. Luoli was right. The heir of Kunlun's field was the face of a realm, especially for the younger generation. Among the younger generation of the seventh realm, only Shao Chun had met the requirements to become an heir of Kunlun's field. Hearing Luoli's words, everyone fell silent. Indeed, Luoli was right. Shao Chun was indeed the most suitable candidate to become the heir apparent of the seventh realm. However, although Shao Chun's strength and talent were very strong, his murderous intent was too strong. This was what everyone was most worried about. Everyone was reluctant to let someone with such a strong murderous intent become the heir apparent of the seventh realm. However, to everyone's surprise, just as Luoli finished speaking and everyone chose to remain silent, Yu Shujin spoke first. I agree with the Sector Lord. Shao Chun is indeed the most suitable candidate for the heir apparent of the seventh realm. As the previous heir of Kunlun's field, Yu Shujin had actually taken the initiative to say such words at this time and even supported Shao Chun. It was something that no one had expected. After all, Shao Chun had replaced Yu Shujin's position, but Yu Shujin still spoke up for Shao Chun. Looking at Yu Shujin's expression, it was clear that there was no hatred at all. It was obvious that Yu Shujin's words were his true thoughts. He really thought that Shao Chun was very suitable to be the heir of Kunlun's field. Yu Shujin's words and Luoli's strong support for Shao Chun made everyone choose to give in. Seeing this, Luoli looked at Yu Shujin and smiled. Then he said directly, in this case, Shao Chun will be the heir apparent of the seventh realm from now on. Luoli made the decision. Hearing this, no one objected. In this way, Shao Chun would become the heir apparent of the seventh realm. Luoli looked at Shao Chun and smiled. Shao Chun, it's up to you now. Hearing Luoli's words, Shao Chun just glanced at him indifferently and then turned to leave. Shao Chun wasn't interested in becoming the heir apparent of the seventh realm. Seeing Shao Chun choose to leave without saying anything, everyone frowned slightly. What kind of attitude was that? However, Luoli didn't care. He knew what had happened to Shao Chun. His original state of mind had already collapsed, so it was reasonable for his personality to change. Shao Chun directly left the main hall. Then Luoli also left. Everyone else also dispersed. Everyone walked out of the main hall one after another. Yu Shujin was still surrounded by many young geniuses from the seventh realm. Everyone gathered around Yu Shujin. Some of them were still dissatisfied. What's Shao Chun's attitude? Brother Shujin spoke up for him, but he didn't even say thank you. He's so arrogant. Everyone was extremely dissatisfied with Shao Chun's attitude. They felt that Shao Chun was too arrogant. Earlier, Yu Shujin had personally expressed her support for Shao Chun to become the heir apparent. But Shao Chun didn't even say thank you. As the Sky Pride spoke, the other Sky Prides also began to express their dissatisfaction. Yu Shujin didn't say much about this. She secretly wondered what had happened to make Shao Chun change so much. She'd fought with Shao Chun before. At that time, Shao Chun was completely different from now. It wasn't just his appearance. Now, Shao Chun felt like an ice cube. He was cold and unapproachable. Moreover, he had a terrifying murderous aura. When she'd fought with Shao Chun before, Yu Shujin hadn't felt such a strong murderous aura from Shao Chun. How much hatred did Shao Chun have in his heart to have such a murderous aura? Please add vote recommend. Chapter 1585. Yu Shujin was very curious about Shao Chun's great change. She knew that something must have happened to Shao Chun. Otherwise, how could a person become like this for no reason? Shao Chun became the heir of the seventh realm. Of course, not many people in the seventh realm believed in Xiao Chen, but Xiao Chen didn't care. He returned to his cave residence. As the heir of the seventh realm, Xiao Chen naturally had his own cave residence in the palace of the seventh realm. It was the best cave residence, second only to Luoli. In the cave residence on a misty mountain peak, Xiao Chen sat alone on the ground. He held a flagon in his hand and kept drinking. At the same time, his blood-red eyes were filled with sorrow. Now, as long as he was free, Xiao Chen couldn't help but think of Qin Shuru and the other two women, as well as Xiao Qing and Bai Ruiyue. An indescribable sense of loneliness kept growing in his heart. He couldn't share this pain with others. No one could understand the pain in Xiao Chen's heart. If it weren't for the hope of reviving his family, Xiao Chen would have killed himself long ago. There was a trace of drunkenness in Xiao Chen's eyes, but other than that, there was a touch of determination in his eyes. He would find a way to revive his family. This was Xiao Chen's only wish now. It was also the only motivation for him to live. As long as he could revive his family, Xiao Chen was willing to do anything. Similarly, he could give up anything. He bore the loneliness and pain in his heart alone, like an injured beast licking its wounds alone. After Xiao Chen successfully became the heir of the seventh realm, he left the main hall. At this time, more than 10 strong people from the seventh realm gathered in Luoli's cave residence. Their cultivation levels were far beyond the immortal realm. Could be said that they were the strongest group of people in the seventh realm after Luoli. Everyone gathered together casually. Luoli, who was sitting on the main seat, was also very easygoing. Looking at more than 10 people present, Luoli said with a smile, "It's about time to break the seal on the gate to the immortal domain." The construction of the gate of the celestial realm had been completed long ago. Luoli hadn't done anything before, but now, the time had come. As long as the seal of the will of the heavenly way on the gate of the celestial realm was broken, the cultivators of the seventh realm would be able to march straight into the hinterland of the seventh realm. Upon hearing Luoli's words, many experts from the seventh realm nodded in agreement. Although they were usually very casual with Luoli, they would carry out Luoli's orders immediately. As they began to break the seal on the gate of the celestial realm, the will of the heavenly way, who was in the seventh wilderness, was naturally aware of this. At the beginning, the will of the heavenly way already knew that once the gate of the celestial realm was formed, it couldn't be destroyed. The seal he had cast was just to buy some time. At this time, outside the gate of the seventh continent, the will of the heavenly way and more than 10 experts from the seventh wilderness were standing in the air. These people were unfamiliar to the people of the seventh wilderness. They were also the strongest cultivators in the seventh wilderness apart from the will of the heavenly way. Their strength was above that of the Wine Taoist and the others. At this time, these people's arrival on the seventh continent didn't attract anyone's attention. They came to the gate of the celestial realm with the will of the heavenly way. Looking at the seal on the gate of the celestial realm, everyone's expression was solemn. After a moment of silence, one of them spoke first, "Will of the heavenly way, the seal won't last for long." Now, the experts of the seventh realm had begun to break the seal. As a result, the seal wouldn't be able to last for too long. Hearing this, the will of the heavenly way's expression didn't change much. He said in a low voice, "At this speed, it should last for half a year." The seal could only last for half a year, which meant that the seventh wilderness only had half a year left to deal with it. Hearing the words of the will of the heavenly Tao, the expressions of the dozen or so experts from the seventh wilderness beside him became even more solemn. There was no doubt that the battle would be extremely fierce in half a year. At that time, because of the gate of the celestial realm, the flames of war between the seventh realm and the seventh wilderness would be brought to the seventh continent. It might even spread to the entire seventh wilderness. The seventh wilderness and the seventh realm had been at odds with each other for so many years. Finally, because of the gate of the celestial realm, This standoff was about to come to an end. The final decisive moment was about to arrive. The will of the heavenly way didn't say anything else. Things had developed to this point. Even he couldn't stop it. Fortunately, there was still at least half a year to prepare. The will of the heavenly way looked at the gate of the celestial realm and said coldly, "In half a year, let's see who will be the final victor. For the sake of the people of the seventh wilderness, I will protect the seventh wilderness even if I have to use my last breath." As he spoke, a righteous aura shot into the sky from the will of the heavenly ways. When they sensed the righteous aura that erupted from the will of the heavenly ways, over a dozen experts from the seventh wilderness cried out loudly as well. As long as the heavenly way exists, the righteousness will last forever. The will of the heavenly way was the protector of all people. This was deeply ingrained in everyone's hearts. Hearing the shouts of the experts of the seventh wilderness, the will of the heavenly way's eyes flashed with determination. The seventh wilderness would definitely win this final battle against the seventh realm. The seventh realm started to break the seal. The will of the heavenly way was also making his final preparations. At this moment, at the entrance of the seventh wilderness, in the white palace opposite the black palace of the seventh realm, a drunk Taoist was looking at the black palace in the distance. This Taoist was none other than the wine Taoist. He could be considered Xiao Chen's master. He already knew that Xiao Chen had betrayed the seventh realm. Moreover, a few days ago, the seventh realm had sent news that Xiao Chen was now the heir of the seventh realm. It wasn't a secret that Xiao Chen had become the heir of the seventh realm. The seventh realm didn't intend to hide it, so it wasn't strange that the seventh wilderness knew. A sliver of mixed emotions flashed through Taoist Wine's eyes as he stared at the black palace in the seventh world from afar. When he first heard that Xiao Chen had killed his father and wife and betrayed the seventh realm, the wine Taoist's first reaction was disbelief. After living with Xiao Chen for 5 years, the wine Taoist knew Xiao Chen's personality very well. How could Xiao Chen kill his father and wife? But on the other hand, the will of the heavenly way had said it himself. The wine Taoist didn't dare to doubt the will of the heavenly way at all. Thus, the wine Taoist had always been very conflicted about this matter. Please add vote recommend. Chapter 1586. The wine Taoist was very conflicted about Xiao Chen. Of course, the will of the heavenly way hadn't tampered with his memories because there was no need for that. As an immortal venerable, the wine Taoist's trust in the will of the heavenly way was almost ingrained in his bones. Although he didn't want to believe that Xiao Chen would really kill his father and wife, since the will of the heavenly way said that Xiao Chen had defected, the wine Taoist instinctively chose to believe it. After so many years, the image of the will of the heavenly way had been deeply ingrained in the hearts of the wine Taoist and the others. It could be said that in the hearts of the wine Taoist and the others, the will of the heavenly way was right. No matter what the will of the heavenly way said, they only needed to obey. Looking at the black palace in the distance, a trace of anger slowly appeared in the wine Taoist's drowsy eyes. After a long while, the wine Taoist said fiercely, "Xiao Chen, why did you do such a thing? I must ask you face to face today." Having said that, the wine Taoist moved and instantly disappeared from where he was. The wine Taoist was very conflicted about the matter of Xiao Chen. Of course, this didn't mean that the wine Taoist believed that Xiao Chen was wronged, but the wine Taoist didn't understand why Xiao Chen would do such a thing. It could be said that when the will of the heavenly way said that Xiao Chen had killed his father and wife and defected to the seventh realm, the wine Taoist had already believed Xiao Chen's words. The reason why he was conflicted was because he couldn't figure out why Xiao Chen would do such a thing. Although the wine Taoist didn't admit that he was Xiao Chen's master, the wine Taoist and Xiao Chen had been together for 5 years after all. Moreover, the wine Taoist did indeed treat Xiao Chen as his disciple from the bottom of his heart. The wine Taoist, who had never taken in a disciple in his life, did not expect that Xiao Chen would do such a thing. The Wine Taoist was indeed very aggrieved these days. Therefore, Wine Taoist couldn't hold back any longer. He flew directly to the Seventh Realm's Black Palace. He wanted to talk to Xiao Chen face to face and clean up the mess. The Wine Taoist chose to believe in the will of the Heavenly Way. This was not his fault. After all, the will of the Heavenly Way held a very important place in the hearts of all living beings. They flew all the way to the Black Palace in the Seventh Realm. Wine Taoist was naturally familiar with the Black Palace. After all, the two sides had been at odds for countless years, and they had fought countless battles. With Wine Taoist's speed, it did not take long for him to appear in front of the Black Palace. Standing in the air and looking at the Black Palace in front of him, Wine Taoist took a deep breath and shouted, "Xiao Chen, get out here." With the support of spiritual power, his voice instantly spread throughout the Black Palace in the Seventh Realm. Soon, several experts from the Seventh Realm flew up into the sky from the Black Palace. The leader of the group was also an immortal venerable, and he knew Wine Taoist. Seeing that the Wine Taoist had come alone, the expert of the Seventh Realm smiled faintly. "Old drunkard, what are you talking about?" The two sides had fought for so many years, so it was not strange that they knew each other. Wine Taoist's eyes were cold when he heard what the expert of the Seventh Realm said. "I don't have time to talk nonsense with you today. Ask Xiao Chen to come out. I have something to say to him." The Wine Taoist came here alone for Xiao Chen. However, the cultivator from the Seventh Realm sneered when he heard what the Wine Taoist said. "Old drunkard, I think you're drunk. You can't call the name of the heir apparent so casually. Besides, this is the Seventh Realm, not the Seventh Wilderness. You're courting death by coming here alone." With that, a cold light flashed in the eyes of the expert of the Seventh Realm. Since the Wine Taoist had come here alone, today was a good opportunity to capture him. However, just as the expert of the Seventh Realm was about to make a move, Xiao Chen suddenly appeared and stood opposite the Wine Taoist. Seeing Xiao Chen suddenly appear, the experts of the Seventh Realm were slightly stunned. Although they did not recognize Xiao Chen's identity as the heir apparent, they still chose to give face to Xiao Chen in front of outsiders. Therefore, they all cupped their hands and greeted him. "Greetings, heir apparent." Although they said that, there was no respect at all. To put it bluntly, they were just putting on an act. However, Xiao Chen did not care about the attitude of these people at all. His blood-red eyes were fixed on the Wine Taoist from beginning to end. Xiao Chen indeed did not expect the Wine Taoist to come to the Black Palace of the Seventh Realm alone. After all, this was the territory of the Seventh Realm. There was no need to say how dangerous it was for the Wine Taoist to come alone. He looked at the Wine Taoist, and a faint glint flashed in his blood-red eyes. Ever since his accident, Xiao Chen had not seen his old friends. Now that he met the Wine Taoist, Xiao Chen's heart was slightly touched. His heart, which had been like stagnant water, seemed to have been thrown into a small stone, giving up layers of ripples. Xiao Chen's heart was in turmoil. At the same time, looking at Xiao Chen, the Wine Taoist was also stunned. For a moment, the Wine Taoist could not believe that the person standing in front of him was actually Xiao Chen. That head of white hair, that pair of blood-red eyes, how did it become like this? He could not believe it, nor could he accept the change in Xiao Chen. It had only been a short time, but Xiao Chen's appearance had changed so much. The Wine Taoist found it difficult to accept for a moment. However, the Wine Taoist was only stunned for a moment. Then, a wisp of anger flashed in his eyes. "Xiao Chen, let me ask you, why did you do something worse than a beast like killing your father and wife? Why did you betray the Seventh Realm?" He questioned as soon as he opened his mouth. This fully showed that the Wine Taoist had always believed the will of the Heavenly Way. He believed that the will of the Heavenly Way would not frame Xiao Chen. In the Wine Taoist's opinion, the will of the Heavenly Way could not be wrong. Xiao Chen might have his reasons for doing something like this, but the wine Taoist had never doubted the will of the heavenly way. Xiao Chen, who had been stirred up by the sight of the wine Taoist, could only laugh bitterly in his heart when he heard the wine Taoist's question. Actually, Xiao Chen had already thought about how the will of the heavenly way would deal with this matter. Since they failed to kill him, the will of the heavenly way would definitely push all the blame onto him, saying that he had killed his father and wife. However, with the will of the heavenly way's position in the hearts of all living beings, no one would be willing to believe him. He laughed bitterly in his heart. Even the wine Taoist did not believe him and believed that he had killed his father and wife. What could Xiao Chen say? Begging for your collection, begging for monthly votes, begging for recommendations. Chapter 1587. Wine Taoist firmly believed that the will of the heavenly way was never wrong and would never frame Xiao Chen. In his eyes, the will of the heavenly way was righteous and his words were unquestionable. Faced with wine Taoist's questioning, the trace of joy in Xiao Chen's heart from seeing an old friend vanished in an instant. He originally wanted to explain himself, but he swallowed his words back down. Xiao Chen let out a self-deprecating laugh and thought to himself, "Yeah, with the reputation of the will of the heavenly way in everyone's hearts, who in the seventh wilderness will believe me now? Black and white, good and evil. All because of a single statement from the will of the heavenly way, everything was reversed so easily." It was clearly the will of the heavenly way who slaughtered Xiao Chen's family. But now the truth was that Xiao Chen killed his father and wife, betrayed the seventh realm, and became a villain and a bastard in everyone's eyes. Xiao Chen didn't want to fuss over this, nor did he want to explain himself. Right now, Xiao Chen's only thought was to resurrect his family. Apart from that, he didn't care about anything else. As for what the world thought of him, he didn't care. Whether they thought of him as a demon or a bastard, Xiao Chen didn't care. Seeing that Xiao Chen remained silent for a long time, wine Taoist yelled again. "What's wrong? Have you nothing to say? Xiao Chen, how could you do such a thing? You killed your father and wife. You?" Wine Taoist said angrily after seeing that Xiao Chen remained silent for a long time. Upon hearing his words, the expressions of the powerhouses from the seventh realm changed slightly. In fact, the people from the seventh realm already knew about Xiao Chen's situation in the seventh wilderness. After all, since wine Taoist knew that Xiao Chen had become the heir of the seventh realm, it wasn't surprising that the seventh realm knew about Xiao Chen. However, what everyone knew was naturally what the will of the heavenly way said. Xiao Chen killed his father and wife and betrayed the seventh realm. All in all, very few people knew the truth. Moreover, Luoli and the other top powerhouses of the seventh realm were trying their best to break the seal of the immortal domain. As a result, no one stepped forward to explain anything to Xiao Chen. Of course, Xiao Chen had never defended himself. In Xiao Chen's opinion, what was the use of defending? How could his words be more important than the will of the way? Besides, would defending himself of the heavenly king's family? There were many discussions about Xiao Chen killing his father and wife in the seventh realm. However, the people from the seventh realm didn't believe in the will of the heavenly way. Therefore, they wouldn't be like wine Taoist, who completely believed in the will of the heavenly way. Coldness flashed through his eyes. The leading powerhouse from the seventh realm shouted in a deep voice, "Wine Taoist, do you want to die?" No matter what, Xiao Chen was the heir of the seventh realm. He was the symbol of the seventh realm. How could he be insulted by wine Taoist? However, wine Taoist didn't seem to care about the powerhouse from the seventh realm. He still stared at Xiao Chen and sneered. What? You're so unscrupulous now that you've become the heir of the seventh realm?" Xiao Chen's silence made wine Taoist even more certain that the will of the heavenly way was right. At the same time, he was even angrier. He was angry because he thought highly of Xiao Chen. It could be said that the wine Taoist thought highly of Xiao Chen. It could be said that the wine Taoist already considered Xiao Chen as his successor. However, Xiao Chen had done something like this. How could wine Taoist not be angry? As the saying went, the greater one's expectations, the greater one's disappointment. Wine Taoist's expectations for Xiao Chen had been obvious. It wasn't strange that he was disappointed now. However, wine Taoist still cared about Xiao Chen. Seeing that Xiao Chen still didn't speak, wine Taoist took a deep breath and said, "Xiao Chen, come with me to the 7th realm. Xiao Chen, come back to the 7th barren territory with me and explain to the heavenly law. I believe the heavenly law will not make things difficult for you. The 7th realm is ambitious. How can you help them?" Wine Taoist had two goals for coming here today. One was to vent his anger, and the other was to persuade Xiao Chen to turn back. In wine Taoist's opinion, Xiao Chen had killed his father and wife. It was a fact that couldn't be changed. However, he shouldn't have joined the 7th realm. If Xiao Chen was willing to turn back and return to the 7th realm, wine Taoist would be willing to use his life to protect Xiao Chen. He could feel wine Taoist's concern for him. Unfortunately, he was too loyal. Or rather, he trusted the will of the heavenly way too much. He didn't know what was going on at all. If Xiao Chen returned to the 7th realm, would he still be alive? There was no chance of survival at all. Even if the people of the 7th realm pleaded for Xiao Chen, the will of the heavenly way probably wouldn't let Xiao Chen go, let alone wine Taoist. Xiao Chen knew too much. Xiao Chen could feel wine Taoist's concern for him. However, could he return to the 7th realm? Impossible. Moreover, Xiao Chen didn't plan on explaining anything. Xiao Chen knew that wine Taoist would never insist on the will of the heavenly way. Xiao Chen shook his head and said calmly, "I, Xiao Chen, will kill the 7th realm in my life." The 7th realm was what the people of the 7th realm called the will of the heavenly way. When he heard Xiao Chen say that he would kill the will of the heavenly way, wine Taoist's expression, which had just calmed down, instantly became furious again. He looked at Xiao Chen angrily. After a while, the anger on wine Taoist's face slowly dissipated. Then, he said coldly, "Well, Xiao Chen, I was wrong about you. Today, I will cut off all ties with you. From now on, you and I will have nothing to do with each other. When we meet on the battlefield in the future, I will not hold back." As he said that, wine Taoist turned his palm into a knife and cut off a piece of his robe. Looking at wine Taoist's actions, Xiao Chen's eyes didn't show any emotion. He had already guessed that this would be the result. The will of the heavenly way's status among the people was too high. Wasn't he the same in the past? He didn't say anything. At the same time, wine Taoist was about to leave after cutting off his robe. However, at this moment, the powerhouse of the 7th realm said coldly, "Old drunkard, are you out of your mind? You can come and go as you please. Do you think this is your backyard? Wine Taoist came here alone today. Obviously, it was a good opportunity to take him down. However, as soon as the powerhouse of the 7th realm finished speaking, Xiao Chen said indifferently, "Let him go." Xiao Chen had no intention of keeping the wine Taoist around. Although he no longer had anything to do with the wine Taoist, there was no point in keeping him around. Furthermore, Xiao Chen really did not want to make a move against the wine Taoist. Only he could understand the pain in his heart. As for wine Taoist, perhaps one day he would see the true face of the will of the heavenly way. Please collect, vote, recommend. Chapter 1588. In the face of wine Taoist's attitude, Xiao Chen didn't want to explain anything, because it was all in vain. Xiao Chen knew how important the will of the heavenly way was to the people of the 7th wilderness, so even if he wanted to go, no one would believe him. Xiao Chen had no intention of keeping the wine Taoist. Seeing this, the wine Taoist looked at Xiao Chen with anger and a hint of disappointment in his eyes. "Xiao Chen, Do you really want to keep making mistakes? Wine Taoist really hoped that Xiao Chen would realize his mistake and return to the seventh wilderness with him. However, he didn't know anything, so he couldn't understand Xiao Chen's thoughts. Xiao Chen didn't answer Wine Taoist, but the strong cultivator of the seventh realm sneered. Old drunkard, I think you really want to die. With that, the strong cultivator of the seventh realm prepared to attack. In his opinion, Wine Taoist dared to come here alone, so he didn't take the seventh realm seriously at all. However, just as he was about to attack, a blood-red sword light suddenly flashed and rushed toward him. The sudden attack made the strong cultivator's expression change, and he could only defend himself. Needless to say, the sword light came from Xiao Chen. He didn't expect Xiao Chen to attack without saying anything. After blocking Xiao Chen's sword, the strong cultivator looked at Xiao Chen angrily and shouted, "Xiao Chen, what is the meaning of this?" Xiao Chen was now the heir of the seventh realm, but he attacked him. The strong cultivator was naturally furious, but in the face of his anger, Xiao Chen just said calmly, "I said, let him go." There was no explanation. Hearing this, the strong cultivator became even angrier, but he didn't continue to attack. After all, Xiao Chen was now the heir of the seventh realm. No matter how angry he was, he couldn't really attack Xiao Chen. Moreover, Xiao Chen had obtained the power of living beings and formed the heavenly immortal mansion. Although he was only at the immortal realm, his combat strength was not much weaker than a celestial venerable. Even if he was no match for Xiao Chen, he was still able to fight back. Xiao Chen stepped forward to stop him. Then, he took a deep look at the Wine Taoist. Without saying anything, he turned around and left. The Wine Taoist's feelings were rather complicated as he watched Xiao Chen leave. After a moment of silence, he shouted, "Xiao Chen, if we meet again on the battlefield, then I won't hold back." Xiao Chen didn't reply, and the Wine Taoist turned around and left. The Wine Taoist's arrival made Xiao Chen give up some of his emotions, but at the same time, he felt more helpless and wronged. The truth of the matter had been completely covered up by the will of the heavenly way. Xiao Chen, who was clearly the victim, had now become an unpardonable bastard. He had killed his father and wife, and had betrayed the seventh realm. She felt wronged in her heart, but who could she complain to? Now, everyone in the seventh wilderness probably thought that he was an unpardonable bastard. Returning to the seventh realm palace alone, Xiao Chen didn't tell anyone about the grievances and anger in his heart. He endured all of it alone and returned to his cave residence. The Wine Taoist came to denounce him, and Xiao Chen felt wronged. On the second day after the Wine Taoist appeared, Luo Li also took the initiative to find Xiao Chen. In Xiao Chen's cave residence, Xiao Chen sat alone in the courtyard drinking wine. His blood-red eyes were filled with sadness and loneliness. Luo Li slowly walked to Xiao Chen's side and sat down opposite Xiao Chen. He said calmly, "What, do you feel wronged?" Xiao Chen glanced at Luo Li and said indifferently, "What's the matter?" Luo Li was the realm lord of the seventh realm, someone who could contend with the will of the heavenly way. He was definitely a top expert in this world, but Xiao Chen was still extremely cold to him. He was used to Xiao Chen's attitude. Or rather, Luo Li could understand Xiao Chen. After all, Luo Li was one of the few people who knew the truth. He knew that the will of the heavenly way had killed Xiao Chen's entire family and knew how much damage Xiao Chen had suffered. Thus, he didn't care about Xiao Chen's attitude. Luo Li still smiled faintly. "You're the heir of the seventh realm now. If you have time, you should interact more with others, especially those little guys. After all, you're from the same generation, and you're the heir of the seventh realm. You're their leader." "Not interested," Xiao Chen replied without even thinking about it. Seeing Xiao Chen's cold attitude, Luo Li smiled helplessly. He didn't dwell on this issue anymore and said, "The gate of the immortal region should be broken in half a year. This time, I've contacted people from the 8th realm to work together and take down the 7th wilderness in one fell swoop. The heir of the 8th realm will arrive first. As the heir of the 7th realm, I want you to receive them. He was already trying his best to break the seal of the gate of the immortal region. In order to take down the 7th wilderness in one fell swoop, Luoli had contacted the realm lord of the 8th realm to work together with the forces of the two realms. The Hachibra Senkai was divided into 8 realms. Each realm operated independently, and the realm lords had similar statuses. Thus, the two realms working together this time could only be said to be cooperation. The realm lord of the 8th realm had already agreed to Luoli's request and sent the heir of the 8th realm to the 7th realm first. The other party was an heir. As the realm lord, Luoli naturally couldn't receive them personally. However, Xiao Chen was the heir of the 7th realm. They had similar statuses. It was clearly the most appropriate for Xiao Chen to receive the heir of the 8th realm. With that, Luoli still looked at Xiao Chen with a faint smile. Seeing that Xiao Chen's expression didn't change at all when he heard that they were going to attack the 7th wilderness, Luoli knew that Xiao Chen really didn't have any thoughts about the 7th wilderness. Of course, with this huge change, Xiao Chen wouldn't care about the 7th wilderness life. Moreover, Xiao Chen really wanted to kill the will of the Heavenly Way immediately to avenge his family and revive them. The 7th wilderness life had nothing to do with Xiao Chen anymore. Xiao Chen also didn't care about the people of the 7th wilderness. His expression didn't change at all. After hearing Luoli's words, Xiao Chen thought for a while and nodded slightly. Okay. He agreed to Luoli's request. Seeing this, Luoli smiled and nodded. Then he took out 2 technique relaying jades from his storage ring and placed them on the stone table. He smiled and said, "These are 2 celestial techniques. I took a long time to choose. They should be suitable for you. Now that you're in the immortal realm, it doesn't make sense that you don't have any celestial technique. You can find some time to cultivate them. Please collect, vote, recommend." Chapter 1589. After handing the 2 immortal skills to Xiao Chen, Luoli didn't stay any longer and quickly got up to leave. After all, breaking the seal of the gate of the immortal area was the most important thing now. Luoli was under a lot of pressure. But before leaving, Luoli reminded Xiao Chen again not to forget about the matter of the 8th realm's heir. After watching Luoli leave, Xiao Chen picked up the 2 jades on the stone table. This was the first time Xiao Chen had come into contact with immortal skills. If it had been before, Xiao Chen would have been wild with joy. But the answer was now. To be honest, Xiao Chen didn't feel much. He used his divine thought to explore the jade. Soon, the contents of the jades were engraved in Xiao Chen's mind. There were indeed 2 immortal skills. One was the 9 Serenities sword technique, and the other was the Heavenly Star Step. Both were immortal skills of quite good quality. Immortal skills were naturally divided into strong and weak and grade. Just like sacred-level martial arts, immortal skills were divided into 3 stars according to the difference in power. Among them, 1-star immortal skills were the weakest and 3-star immortal skills were the strongest. The 9 Serenities sword technique and Heavenly Star Step that Luoli gave Xiao Chen were 2-star immortal skills. They were also the limit that Xiao Chen could cultivate at present. Xiao Chen was only in the immortal realm, so he couldn't cultivate 3-star immortal skills. Therefore, 2-star immortal skills were Xiao Chen's limit. Just as Luoli said, he had indeed chosen these 2 immortal skills for a long time. They were indeed the most suitable immortal skills for Xiao Chen to cultivate. Just by looking at the cultivation methods of these 2 immortal skills, Xiao Chen could be sure that their power was far beyond sacred-level martial arts. In other words, they were on a completely different level. Sacred-level martial arts were still within the scope of martial arts, but immortal skills were different. They were beyond martial arts. After briefly reading through the contents of the two immortal skills, Xiao Chen began to cultivate them. In the following days, Xiao Chen immersed himself in cultivation every day. His hard work caused the hearts of the maidservants in charge of serving Xiao Chen to tremble. This was no longer cultivation. This was completely self-torture. Xiao Chen had almost no time to rest for 24 hours a day. Xiao Chen was like a machine that did not know fatigue. He was cultivating all the time. Of course, no one knew that the reason Xiao Chen was so desperate to cultivate was because Xiao Chen wanted revenge, and revenge required enough strength. Although Xiao Chen had broken through to the immortal realm, he was still too weak when facing the will of the heavenly way. He was so weak that he didn't even have the strength to fight back. Xiao Chen didn't want to experience that kind of despair and powerlessness a second time. Therefore, Xiao Chen cultivated with all his might, desperately wanting to become stronger. As for the second reason, Xiao Chen could only forget the sorrow in his heart through cultivation. Every time he was free, Xiao Chen would involuntarily think of Qin Shiru, the four girls, Xiao Qing, and Bai Ruiyue. It could be said that Xiao Chen used cultivation to numb himself so that he wouldn't think of them and wouldn't be immersed in the sorrow of the past. Such crazy cultivation made the four girls beside Xiao Chen extremely worried. As the heir of the seventh realm, Xiao Chen naturally had servants who were responsible for serving him. There were 4 maids, and all of them were good-looking. They could be considered first-class beauties anywhere. Moreover, the 4 maids were very talented in cultivation. They had all reached the beginning of the Saint Realm. However, the 4 maids had been assigned to Xiao Chen's side for some time now. It was a pity that Xiao Chen did not pay any attention to them at all. In fact, the exchange between the two of them probably did not exceed 10 sentences. He didn't need the 4 maids to serve him. Moreover, with Xiao Chen's current cold temperament, the 4 maids didn't dare to casually approach him. Time passed day by day. Under Xiao Chen's desperate cultivation, the Netherworld Sword Technique and the Heavenly Star Step, the two-star immortal techniques, naturally made great progress. After 3 months, Xiao Chen had already cultivated these 2 immortal techniques to the beginner realm. The beginner realm couldn't be underestimated. The beginner realm of a 2-star immortal technique was several times more powerful than a top-tier Saint Realm martial arts technique. Moreover, to cultivate 2 2-star immortal techniques to the beginner realm in just 3 months was already an extremely heaven-defying speed. It should be known that the difficulty of cultivating an immortal technique was far greater than that of a Saint Realm martial arts technique. Of course, the main reason why he could reach the beginner realm so quickly was because of Xiao Chen's hard work. Thinking about it, in 3 months there was almost no rest. He had devoted all his attention to cultivation. How could he not improve quickly? Moreover, because he had absorbed the power of living beings, Xiao Chen's talent had increased from the original 99 meters to 100 meters. It could be said that he had maxed out his talent. This difference couldn't be underestimated. The difference between a talent of 99 meters and a talent of 100 meters was definitely not as simple as it seemed on the surface. It was no exaggeration to say that after his talent had increased, Xiao Chen's comprehension ability had at least doubled. Otherwise, it would be impossible for him to cultivate 2 2-star immortal techniques to the beginner realm in less than 3 months. On this day, Xiao Chen was cultivating the 9 nether sword technique in the cave as usual. However, at this moment, a maid hurried in and bowed respectfully before Xiao Chen. Yu Shujin requests an audience. Yu Shujin came to see me? Hearing this, Xiao Chen stopped what he was doing. After a moment of silence, he said indifferently, "Bring her to the front hall and wait for me." Hearing Xiao Chen's words, the maid immediately responded respectfully. Then, she quickly turned and left with a blush on her pretty face. Because of Xiao Chen's cold temperament, the 4 maids around him didn't dare to approach Xiao Chen at all. However, the four maids loved Xiao Chen in their hearts. First of all, Xiao Chen's strength was obvious. Moreover, after this incident, Xiao Chen's appearance had changed greatly. Compared to before, he didn't feel as otherworldly as before. However, his snow-white hair and blood-red eyes gave off a demonic feeling. It was as if people couldn't help but fall in love with him. She did not know how to put it, but the current Xiao Chen seemed to be more attractive than before. Of course, Xiao Chen didn't care about this at all. Right now, he only wanted to revive his family. As for other things, Xiao Chen didn't care at all. After stopping his cultivation, Yu Shujin took the initiative to come to see him. Xiao Chen actually guessed why she came. It should be that the heir of the Eighth Realm was about to arrive. About 3 months had passed. According to Luo Li's estimation, the heir of the Eighth Realm would arrive in a few days. Since he had promised Luo Li, Xiao Chen could only come out and receive the heir of the Eighth Realm. Please add vote recommend. Chapter 1590. Wonderful, no pop-up window free reading. Yu Shujin came to the hall. Seeing Xiao Chen walk over, he cupped his hands and bowed. Greetings, heir. Yu Shujin didn't show any hostility to Xiao Chen at all. He wasn't angry that Xiao Chen had stolen his heir's position. Yu Shujin was like this. He was very egotistical and always did things according to his own preferences. Just like the first time he met Xiao Chen in the northern underworld wonderland. He had the chance to defeat Xiao Chen, but Yu Shujin insisted on having a fair fight with Xiao Chen. In the end, he lost the best chance and gave the power of all living beings to Xiao Chen. This time, Xiao Chen replaced him and became the new heir of the Seventh Realm. If it were anyone else, they would find it hard to accept. At least, they would be angry. However, Yu Shujin acted as if nothing had happened. In Yu Shujin's opinion, he wasn't strong enough. It didn't matter if he gave the heir's position to Xiao Chen, so he didn't hate him. Anyway, Yu Shujin often did things that others couldn't understand. She was completely independent and didn't care about what others around her said. Xiao Chen didn't have any hostility toward Yu Shujin. Looking at Yu Shujin, Xiao Chen said indifferently, "The people from the Eighth Realm are here?" "Yes, they're here." Hearing this, Yu Shujin nodded. Xiao Chen didn't care about the heir of the Eighth Realm, so he didn't pay much attention. In Xiao Chen's opinion, he only needed to show his face. As for the other things, he could leave them to Yu Shujin and the others. Xiao Chen couldn't accompany the heir of the Eighth Realm all the time. Xiao Chen wasn't in the mood either. Therefore, Xiao Chen didn't care about the arrival of the heir of the Eighth Realm at all. Yu Shujin and the others had been responsible for it. Now that the heirs of the Eighth Field had arrived, Xiao Chen nodded slightly. "Let's go. Since they were already here, they might as well meet them." As for the rest, only Yu Shujin and the others could handle it. Yu Shujin was used to Xiao Chen's indifferent attitude. Ever since they came to the Seventh World, Xiao Chen had always been indifferent to everyone. Therefore, she didn't say anything and led Xiao Chen to the cave dwelling where the people from the Eighth World were. This time, the Seventh Field and the Eighth Field had teamed up to attack the Seventh Wilderness. The heir of the Eighth Field had just arrived first. He only had 4 young prides from the Eighth Field with him. There were 5 people in total. Their accommodations had been arranged for them. However, while Yu Shujin and Xiao Chen were on their way, a young man in a purple robe was scolding another young man in the cave dwelling where the heir of the Eighth Field was. The young man in the purple robe was the heir of the Eighth Field. His name was Yi Shao. The young man being scolded was a young pride from the Seventh Field. Yi Shao was scolding the young man because of Xiao Chen. As an heir of the Eighth World, Yi Shao came to the Seventh World, but it wasn't an heir of the Seventh World who met him. Instead, it was an ordinary prodigy. This made Yi Shao feel like he was being underestimated. What a joke. He came to the Seventh Field with his status, but the heir of the Seventh Field actually showed up. Was he looking down on him? Thus, as soon as he entered the cave dwelling, Yi Xiao flew into a rage. Not only did he scold the pride, but he even injured more than 10 people from the 7th field who had come to greet him. The heir of the 7th field is so arrogant. He didn't even show up. Instead, he sent small fries like you to embarrass himself. Are you looking down on the 8th field? Yi Xiao scolded angrily. Hearing this, the pride from the 7th field's eyes filled with anger. This was normal. It would be strange if he didn't get angry after being scolded like this. Of course, this pride was wronged. After all, he couldn't control Xiao Chen's will. Besides, because Xiao Chen had just become the heir of the 7th field, no one was willing to accept him. In addition, Xiao Chen had a cold personality. Thus, the prides from the 7th field didn't sincerely acknowledge Xiao Chen. Thus, no one invited Xiao Chen to come out this time. But who would have thought that Yi Xiao would be so arrogant? Not only did he beat up more than 10 prides from the 7th field, but he also flew into a rage here because Xiao Chen hadn't shown up. He was furious, but in front of Yi Xiao, this pride from the 7th field didn't dare to talk back. He was only at the initial stage of the quasi-saint realm, while Yi Xiao was already at the immortal realm and had also condensed the celestial immortal mansion. There was a huge difference in their strength, so he naturally didn't dare to be presumptuous in front of Yi Xiao. Suppressing the anger in his heart, he didn't say a word and let Yi Xiao scold him. Seeing this, Yi Xiao was even angrier. Without thinking, he slapped this pride and sent him flying. Not satisfied with the scolding, he directly took action and was sent flying by Yi Xiao's slap. Blood trickled down the corner of this pride's mouth. At the same time, his eyes were filled with anger. However, because he was afraid of Yi Xiao's identity, he still didn't talk back. He silently endured Yi Xiao's scolding. However, at this time, Yi Xiao seemed to be addicted to beating him up. Without stopping, he slapped the pride from the 7th field again and sent him flying again. At the same time, he shouted coldly, "Where's Yu Shujin? Tell her to come out personally, or I'll destroy you." Yi Xiao glared at the pride from the 7th field and said coldly. In Yi Xiao's heart, the heir of the 7th field was Yu Shujin. Of course, he didn't know that the heir of the 7th field had changed long ago. Appointing an heir was an internal matter of the 7th field, so there was naturally no need to inform people from other fields. Thus, Yi Xiao didn't know that the heir of the 7th field was no longer Yu Shujin. The 7th world's prodigy's face reddened when he heard Yi Xiao's words. His mouth was filled with blood as he stared at Yi Xiao coldly. His hatred had reached its peak. It was a naked insult. Moreover, Yi Xiao was the heir of the 8th field and had nothing to do with the 7th field. It would be strange if this pride wasn't angry after being humiliated like this. However, just as the pride from the 7th field was about to speak, a blood-red sword light suddenly shot towards Yi Xiao. The sword came without warning, and Yi Xiao did not hold back at all. Immediately, Yi Xiao felt an extremely dangerous aura envelop him. He did not dare to be careless, and he immediately stretched out both his palms to block the sword. Please add vote recommend. Chapter 1591. No one had expected this sudden attack. However, Yi Xiao was an heir of the 8th realm after all. He was naturally capable, so he successfully blocked the blood-red sword light. After successfully blocking the sword light, Yi Xiao immediately looked towards the entrance of the cave residence. He saw Xiao Chen and Yu Shujin walking in slowly. Seeing them, Yi Xiao's first reaction was to say, "Yu Shujin, you're courting death." However, Yi Xiao soon realized that something was wrong. Yu Shujin was actually following Xiao Chen. She was consciously one step behind Xiao Chen. Yi Xiao had thought that it was Yu Shujin who had attacked him. After all, he could feel that she was no weaker than him. In the entire 7th realm, Yu Shujin was probably the only one among the younger generation who could match him. However, it seemed that this wasn't the case. Yu Shujin, who was supposed to be an heir of the 7th realm, was actually following a young man in white. Judging from their positions, it was obvious that the young man in white had a higher status than Yu Shujin. Looking away from Yu Shujin, Yi Xiao looked at Xiao Chen. The first impression that Xiao Chen gave Yi Xiao was that he was evil and then cold. His gaze was indifferent. Facing Yi Xiao's gaze, Xiao Chen didn't show any weakness. His blood-red eyes were indifferent and emotionless. He had never felt such an indifferent aura from someone before. It was as if he wasn't interested in anything in the world. How cold did he have to be able to do this? Confused, Yi Xiao looked away first. He looked at Yu Shujin and asked, "Yu Shujin, aren't you looking down on me too much? You sent these ants to welcome me. Is this enough?" He still thought that Yu Shujin was an heir of the seventh realm. However, hearing his words, Yu Shujin replied indifferently, "Yi Xiao, don't be mistaken. I'm not an heir of the seventh realm now. Senior Xiao Chen is." With that, Yu Shujin looked at Xiao Chen. To be honest, Yu Shujin had also been shocked by Xiao Chen earlier. As soon as they entered the cave, they saw Yi Xiao hit the pride of the seventh realm. Yu Shujin had wanted to scold him, but who would have thought that Xiao Chen would be even more direct? He didn't even think before slashing out with his sword. He didn't show any mercy at all. Yu Shujin could see that Xiao Chen was a man who did not care about anything. As long as he was unhappy, he could stab you with his sword at any time. Moreover, he would do it without any hesitation. She looked at Xiao Chen in shock. At the same time, hearing Yu Shujin's words, Yi Xiao's gaze fell on Xiao Chen again. Yi Xiao and Yu Shujin had met before. Although they weren't very close, they had at least met a few times. But unexpectedly, Yu Shujin was no longer an heir of the seventh realm. Facing Xiao Chen, Yi Xiao wasn't affected at all. The two had never met before. He didn't even know when the seventh realm had changed their heirs. However, after the fight just now, Yi Xiao didn't dare to underestimate Xiao Chen at all. Originally, Yu Shujin, the heir of the seventh realm, was the weakest of the 8 heirs of the Hachibra Senkai. Yi Xiao and the others all looked down on Yu Shujin. Because the seventh realm hadn't been able to obtain the power of all living beings in the seventh wilderness, Yu Shujin couldn't break through to the immortal realm and condense the heavenly immortal mansion. Unable to condense the heavenly immortal mansion and break through to the immortal realm, Yu Shujin was naturally much weaker than Yi Xiao and the other heirs of the other realms. Therefore, Yi Xiao had always looked down on Yu Shujin. But facing Xiao Chen, Yu Shujin didn't look down on him at all. Because after the fight just now, Yi Xiao clearly felt that Xiao Chen wasn't weaker than him, even though it was only one move. Yu Shujin was also someone who had condensed the heavenly immortal mansion. Xiao Chen was clearly stronger than Yu Shujin. Yi Xiao didn't deny this, but so what? Xiao Chen's sudden attack made Yi Xiao even angrier. Sizing up Xiao Chen, Yi Xiao said coldly, "The new heir of the seventh realm? Ha, is this how you greet an important guest?" Important guest? Hearing this, Xiao Chen ignored him. Instead, he looked at the pride of the seventh realm who'd been injured by him. His eyes were still emotionless. "Did you hit him?" Hearing this, Yi Xiao didn't intend to explain at all. Instead, he shouted coldly, "So what? I don't care about the seventh realm, but you and I are both heirs of the seventh realm. Do you think it's appropriate for these ants to greet me?" To Yi Xiao, these ants were nothing if he'd hit them. Was Xiao Chen going to seek justice for them? Besides, he and Xiao Chen were both heirs of the seventh realm. Their statuses and abilities were similar. Yi Xiao wasn't afraid of Xiao Chen at all. Of course, the most important thing was that the seventh realm and the eighth realm were about to join forces to attack the seventh wilderness. At this juncture, Yi Xiao didn't believe that Xiao Chen would offend him completely over such a small matter. After all, compared to the seventh wilderness, he could pretend that he'd never hit someone. Yi Xiao was very confident that he had to consider the big picture. He didn't restrain himself at all. Besides, it wasn't just Yi Xiao. One of the 4 prides of the 8th realm who'd come with him also said coldly. They didn't respect Yi Zhao's senior brother, so they deserved to be hit. How can these ants take Yi Zhao's sternum? They're not worthy. The 4 prides of the 8th realm were obviously Yi Zhao's most loyal lackeys. With Yi Zhao's support, they naturally weren't afraid of Shao Chen. They thought that Shao Chen would choose to keep the peace out of consideration for the big picture. Unfortunately, Yi Zhao thought too much. Perhaps a month ago, Shao Chen might have thought of keeping the peace. But now, Shao Chen obviously wouldn't consider the problem like that. His gaze shifted from Yi Zhao to the pride of the 8th realm who'd spoken earlier. Faced with Shao Chen's gaze, the pride's smug smile quickly disappeared. He couldn't help but feel a little nervous. Being stared at by Shao Chen, he didn't know why, but he felt like he was being shrouded by death. It had to be said that this pride had a good intuition. After Shao Chen looked at him, Shao Chen had already pointed his finger before the others could react. He instantly performed the 9th finger of the 9th heaven sword finger, the Xianyuan sword finger. A blood-red light instantly shot towards the pride's forehead. Please add vote recommend. Chapter 1592. In Yi Zhao's opinion, since the 7th realm and the 8th realm were about to join forces, as the heir of the 7th realm, Shao Chen obviously had to consider the big picture. Besides, Yi Zhao hadn't done anything. He hadn't killed anyone. He had just humiliated the genius of the 7th realm. Could Shao Chen really do anything to him? He thought it was just a small matter. Besides, Yi Zhao felt very happy to be able to kill Breeze from the 7th realm. Unfortunately, Yi Zhao obviously didn't know Shao Chen well. Shao Chen was definitely not someone who cared about the big picture. Now, Shao Chen had no taboos. The proud son of heaven from the 8th realm, who was standing next to Yi Zhao, had only interjected a few words. Now, Shao Chen had already pointed out his finger and performed the red cloud sword finger in an instant. The blood-red sword light streaked across the sky and went straight for the proud son of heaven from the 8th realm. After the incident with the will of the heavenly way, Shao Chen's murderous intent had reached the extreme. Under the influence of such a strong murderous intent, no matter what martial technique Shao Chen used, the sword edge he displayed was blood-red. Furthermore, the blood-red blade not only gave off a demonic feeling, but the murderous intent it emitted made one's hair stand on end. At this moment, the genius of the 8th realm, who was enveloped by Shao Chen's Xianyuan sword finger, stood rooted to the ground as if he had been struck dumb. The murderous intent emanating from Shao Chen had completely frightened the young man. After his cultivation had reached the immortal realm, the power of the Xianyuan sword finger had also increased greatly. It was completely different from before. Because no one present had thought that Shao Chen would suddenly attack, no one had time to react when they saw the Xianyuan sword finger heading straight for the genius of the 8th realm, including Yi Zhao. Yi Zhao was both shocked and angry. How dare Shao Chen attack? How dare Shao Chen attack him directly? Moreover, it was obvious that he didn't hold back at all. It was obvious that he was going to kill him. Was this guy crazy? He wanted to kill just because of a disagreement. The heir of the 8th realm had only mocked him, and Shao Chen had directly attacked him. Did he not care about the 8th realm at all? Yi Zhao was terrified, but it was obviously too late to stop him. He could only look at Shao Chen and shout coldly, "How dare you! Stop it!" He wanted Shao Chen to stop, but in the face of Yi Zhao's angry shout, Shao Chen didn't seem to hear him at all. He had no intention of stopping at all. Under everyone's gaze, the Xianyuan sword finger directly pierced through the genius head. He was only at the saint fulfillment realm. Such a cultivation level was naturally like an ant in front of Shao Chen. He could crush him easily. Dead. They didn't expect Shao Chen to really dare to kill him. Watching the genius body slowly fall to the ground, the other 3 geniuses of the 8th realm who had come with Yi Zhao all turned pale. They had thought that there wouldn't be any danger at all on this trip to the seventh realm. Who would have thought that they would meet a lunatic who would kill just because of a disagreement? They were scared out of their wits. Compared to the three geniuses of the eighth realm, Yi Xiao was more furious than shocked. He glared at Xiao Chen, gritting his teeth so hard that they were about to shatter, and said viciously, "You! How dare you? He's from the eighth realm. How dare you kill him?" He didn't expect that Xiao Chen would dare to kill someone. However, in the face of Yi Xiao's anger, Xiao Chen only said two words indifferently. "You have a cheap mouth." Upon hearing Xiao Chen's words, Yi Xiao was even more furious. Yu Shujin, who was behind Xiao Chen, was completely dumbfounded. This guy really didn't care about anything. He killed just like that. Xiao Chen didn't care about the other party's identity at all. In front of Yi Xiao, Xiao Chen killed a genius from the eighth realm. The anger in Yi Xiao's eyes seemed to be about to burst out. At that moment, he took a step forward and the terrifying aura of the immortal realm surged into the sky. Xiao Chen killed one of his men in front of him. Yi Xiao felt ashamed. Looking at Xiao Chen, Yi Xiao shouted coldly, well done, heir of the seventh realm. Today let me, Yi Xiao, see how capable you are. How dare you?" It was obvious that he wanted to make a move. However, before Yi Xiao could finish his sentence, a blood-red sword light had already rushed towards him. Xiao Chen made a move right away. Seeing this, Yi Xiao had no choice but to swallow what he was about to say. After blocking Xiao Chen's sword, Yi Xiao was even angrier. He gritted his teeth and said, If you want to fight, then fight. You talk too much. If you want to die, I'll fulfill your wish." This time, Xiao Chen didn't even give Yi Xiao a chance to speak. He moved his feet and used the heavenly star step. His entire body disappeared from the spot and appeared in front of Yi Xiao in the blink of an eye. Yi Xiao was simply making a move without any hesitation. Yi Xiao, who was originally angry, was also stunned by Xiao Chen at this time. He simply could not figure out how there could be such a person in this world. Not only did he kill someone because of a disagreement, he had only said a few harsh words, and Xiao Chen looked like he was going to fight to the death. From the beginning to the end, Yi Xiao didn't think that today's incident was a big deal. At most, both sides would part on bad terms. He never thought that things would develop to this point. However, Yi Xiao didn't have the chance to think too much because Xiao Chen had already attacked. The dustless sword in his hand slashed out. Speaking of which, after experiencing this huge change, not only did Xiao Chen's appearance change drastically, but so did the dustless sword. Originally, the dustless sword emitted a faint golden light, but now, the dustless sword had become a killing sword. It was blood-red all over. The red color was so vivid that it made one's heart palpitate. It was as though the entire sword was condensed from blood. Moreover, the dustless sword also exuded an extremely dense killing intent. It was a killing sword, a sword that was born for killing. It gave off a completely different feeling from before. The dustless sword used to be noble and domineering, but now, it was overflowing with killing intent and was extremely evil. In fact, it wasn't strange for the dustless sword to have such a change. After all, the dustless sword was transformed from the heavenly sword embryo. It was Xiao Chen's natal divine sword. Now that Xiao Chen had undergone such a huge change, the dustless sword would naturally change as well. It would change according to its master's changes. This was the strongest part of a natal divine sword. It could always be the same as its master. Please add it to your collection. Monthly vote recommend it. Chapter 1593. He did not hesitate at all and did not give Yi Xiao the slightest chance at all. His figure appeared in front of Xiao Chen in an instant, and Xiao Chen immediately stabbed out with his sword. That terrifying murderous intent gushed out at this moment. Obviously, he did not hold back at all. Faced with Xiao Chen's attack, Yi Xiao naturally would not allow himself to be captured without putting up a fight. He immediately made his move. The storage ring on his hand flashed, and a black short knife appeared in his hand. The knife and sword collided, and the terrifying force instantly caused the surrounding space to collapse. At the same time, the entire cave dwelling was instantly razed to the ground. Those originally beautiful buildings, fake mountains and so on were all gone in an instant, destroyed in an instant. Xiao Chen and Yi Xiao were both at the immortal stage. The destructive force of their battle was naturally extremely terrifying. After the two of them collided, Yu Shujin and the others immediately distanced themselves from them. What a joke! With Xiao Chen and Yi Xiao's combat strength, it would not be fun if they were caught in the crossfire. After the collision, neither of them gained the upper hand. It could be said that they were evenly matched. However, Xiao Chen did not seem to have any intention of stopping after the collision. He pointed out his finger and used the Xianyuan finger sword again. Seeing Xiao Chen's attack coming at him again, Yi Xiao also became furious. He slapped out with his palm and used the same Saint-class upper-grade martial technique. The two of them collided and cancelled each other out again. Xiao Chen and Yi Xiao clashed twice in a row, and both of them were evenly matched in the end. However, Xiao Chen's next attack was completely unexpected to Yi Xiao. He was simply putting his life on the line. Sword domain, the power of law, and the tempered battle body. Xiao Chen could be said to have used all his combat strength. In an instant, he engaged in a fierce battle with Yi Xiao. In the fierce battle, Yi Xiao was extremely angry at the beginning. However, as the battle continued, Yi Xiao's anger gradually subsided and was replaced by a feeling of madness. A lunatic, a complete lunatic. In Yi Xiao's opinion, Xiao Chen was really a lunatic. In the blink of an eye, he had already exchanged hundreds of moves with Xiao Chen. Xiao Chen was obviously putting his life on the line. Moreover, from Xiao Chen's attack, Yi Xiao could clearly feel that Xiao Chen really wanted to kill him. He was not playing around, nor was he bluffing. He really wanted to kill Yi Xiao. But did he have to go to this extent? It was not a big deal. He only beat a few heaven's prides from the seventh realm. With Xiao Chen and Yi Xiao's combat strength, they would probably have to pay a high price to win, let alone kill each other. Therefore, from the beginning to the end, Yi Xiao did not have the intention to fight Xiao Chen to the death. As for the previous scolding, it was because Xiao Chen had killed a heaven's pride from the eighth realm in front of him. Therefore, if Yi Xiao did not say a word, it would be too embarrassing. It was all for the sake of face. It was also because Yi Xiao did not have the intention to fight Xiao Chen that Yi Xiao gradually fell into a disadvantageous position in the face of Yi Xiao's attack. There was no other way. Yi Xiao did not want to fight Xiao Chen to the death, because once the two of them fought to the death, no one could say for sure what the final outcome would be. Moreover, there was no reason to fight to the death. Secondly, there was no benefit to it. Naturally, Yi Xiao did not want to fight Xiao Chen to the death. However, even though Yi Xiao was unwilling, Xiao Chen was different. Xiao Chen's attacks came in waves. Moreover, in the face of Yi Xiao's attacks many times, Xiao Chen did not dodge or avoid, which made Yi Xiao extremely depressed. In Yi Xiao's eyes, Xiao Chen was a complete madman. At this moment, Yi Xiao had completely regarded him as a madman. It was clearly a very small matter. If it were anyone else, they would probably not even attack, let alone kill. However, not only did Xiao Chen kill, but he also wanted to fight to the death. This was simply too much. Before coming here, Yi Xiao had never thought that the heir of the seventh realm would be a lunatic. As the saying went, the violent are afraid of the reckless are afraid of the reckless, and the barefoot are not afraid of the wearing of shoes. Xiao Chen looked like he was going to fight to the death, while Yi Xiao clearly did not want to and did not dare to fight to the death with Xiao Chen. As a result, he was naturally suppressed by Xiao Chen. A second ago, it was a beautiful cave abode, but now it was completely destroyed. While fighting fiercely with Xiao Chen, Yi Xiao shouted, "Stop, stop." Yi Xiao really did not want to continue fighting. This Xiao Chen was simply a lunatic. He would not let go. It was just a small matter. Did he have to go so far? Yi Xiao was arrogant and domineering. However, in front of a lunatic like Xiao Chen, Yi Xiao's arrogance and dominance were completely useless. You can be arrogant and domineering, but don't provoke me. Otherwise, I will fight to the death with you. Hearing Yi Xiao's words, Xiao Chen did not seem to have any intention of stopping. His attacks did not decrease at all. Seeing this, Yi Xiao completely lost his temper. If there was some deep hatred between the two of them, Yi Xiao might really fight to the death with Xiao Chen. However, was there a need to fight to the death over such a small matter? He had no intention of continuing the fight at all. Moreover, the murderous intent radiating from Xiao Chen shocked Yi Xiao. As the heir of the Eighth Realm, Yi Xiao had seen the other heirs of Hachibara Senkai before. He had to admit that apart from Yu Shujin, none of the other heirs of Hachibara Senkai were simple. They were all outstanding talents. However, in all his life, this was the first time Yi Xiao had felt such a strong murderous intent. Even many of the strong people of the older generation might not be as strong as Xiao Chen in terms of murderous intent. It was hard to imagine how Xiao Chen had cultivated such a murderous intent. How many people did he have to kill to cultivate such a terrifying murderous intent? The more he fought, the more aggrieved and helpless he felt. In the end, Yi Xiao's anger, arrogance and aggressiveness completely dissipated. He said to Xiao Chen helplessly, "Fine, fine. Fine, fine, fine. I'm afraid of you. Stop, stop. I was wrong today. Let's forget about what happened before. How about that?" Yi Xiao actually took the initiative to admit his mistake. Hearing this, the 3 Eighth Realm geniuses who came with him were stunned. As Yi Xiao's loyal henchmen, they knew Yi Xiao's character very well. Given Yi Xiao's arrogant and domineering personality, it was simply impossible for him to admit his mistake. But now, Nightingale actually admitted her mistake to someone of the same generation as her, as if they had witnessed a miracle. The 3 Eighth Realm geniuses stared at Yi Xiao in disbelief. Yi Xiao was also very depressed. What the F***ck was going on? Please add vote recommend. Chapter 1594. Yi Xiao bowed his head and admitted his mistake. His tone was full of helplessness. Upon hearing this, Xiao Chen did not continue attacking. He stopped attacking and looked at Yi Xiao indifferently. Faced with Xiao Chen's gaze, Yi Xiao smiled bitterly and said, "I admit my mistake. I admit my mistake, okay? It's just a small matter. Do you have to risk your life?" Yi Xiao really did not want to continue fighting with Xiao Chen. This guy was crazy. Yi Xiao voluntarily lowered his head. Seeing this, Xiao Chen did not waste any more time. With a thought, he put away the dustless sword and said flatly, "If you attack anyone from the 7th Wilderness again, I will not hold back." With that, Xiao Chen turned and left without waiting for Yi Xiao's reply. Looking at Xiao Chen's back, Yi Xiao looked even more helpless. Besides Yi Xiao, Yu Shujin and the prodigy from the 7th Realm also looked at Xiao Chen differently. Especially the prodigy who had been injured by Yi Xiao. His impression of the Snack City had improved a lot. After all, as the heir of the 7th Realm, Xiao Chen had fought for the prodigies from the 7th Realm and beaten Yi Xiao to admit his mistake. This had touched everyone's hearts. At first, they did not approve of Xiao Chen. However, after this incident, their impression of Xiao Chen had improved a lot. However, Xiao Chen clearly did not care about their thoughts at all. After killing a prodigy from the 8th Realm and fighting Yi Xiao, Xiao Chen left immediately. As for what happened next, naturally, Yu Shujin could handle it. This cave abode was completely ruined. Not only were the surrounding buildings completely destroyed, but even the space had become extremely unstable. He looked at Yu Shujin. Faced with Yi Zhao's gaze, Yu Shujin naturally did not dare to be negligent. She immediately said, "Senior Yi Xiao, I will arrange for another cave abode." Xiao Chen could ignore Yi Xiao and even beat Yi Xiao until he admitted his mistake. However, Yu Shujin could not. With her strength, she could not compete with Yi Xiao at all. Therefore, now that Xiao Chen had left, Yu Shujin naturally did not dare to neglect Yi Xiao. Hearing Yu Shujin's words, Yi Xiao impatiently waved his hand and said, "Then hurry up." What bad luck! Yi Xiao was helpless against Xiao Chen, but he really did not care about Yu Shujin. It was obviously impossible for Yi Xiao to hold a grudge against Xiao Chen because of this. However, Yi Xiao did not expect Xiao Chen to be so crazy. After this encounter, Yi Xiao also understood that the heir of the seventh realm was purely crazy. If it was not necessary, it was best not to provoke him. The job of receiving Yi Xiao completely fell to Yu Shujin. As for Xiao Chen, after the battle with Yi Xiao, he did not appear again. They settled down in the seventh realm. On this day, Yi Xiao was drinking, and Yu Shujin was accompanying him. It had to be said that other than the fact that Xiao Chen's madness had made Yi Xiao suffer a little at the beginning, the seventh realm still valued Yi Xiao very much. At least, he had done well in all aspects. As they drank, Yi Xiao asked Yu Shujin, "Why did you suddenly give up your heir's position?" Yi Xiao knew that the heir of the seventh realm had been Yu Shujin before. Now, the position had been taken by Xiao Chen. Speaking of Xiao Chen, Yi Xiao could not help but shake his head inwardly. Crazy. This person was completely crazy. Thinking of Xiao Chen, Yi Zhao's first reaction was helplessness. In response to Yi Zhao's question, Yu Shujin calmly replied, "Senior Xiao Chen obtained the power of all living beings. The heir's position is naturally more suitable for him." Yu Shujin really did not think much about Xiao Chen becoming the heir's heir. Days passed. During this time, the seventh realm was indeed trying their best to break the seal of the gate of the immortal region. The progress was quite smooth. However, while the seventh realm was working, on the other side, the will of the heavenly way naturally could not be idle in the seventh wasteland. On an unknown continent, this continent was only a very small one in the seventh wilderness. Martial arts were not flourishing there, and the strongest person there was only a quasi-saint. There were many continents like this in the seventh wasteland, but their status was obviously not as high as the 7 main continents of the seventh wasteland. This day, the will of the heavenly way descended on this continent. Then, the end of the world came. A ray of 5-colored light fell from the sky. Those who were illuminated by this ray of light were instantly annihilated. The people of the entire continent were slaughtered. There were at least hundreds of millions of them. The will of the heavenly way used such a bloody method to turn this continent into a land of death in an instant. All the living beings on it were exterminated. After slaughtering the people of the entire continent, the deaths of all the living beings on this continent condensed into a fist-sized blood ball. In order to deal with the upcoming attack of the seventh realm, the will of the heavenly way had to make some preparations. This blood ball was the means of the will of the heavenly way. The blood ball condensed from hundreds of millions of lives was very simple. When used together with the heavenly way stone, it could help people break through to the immortal state faster. In order to deal with the upcoming attack of the seventh realm, the will of the heavenly way naturally could not wait for death. He had to strengthen the power of the seventh wasteland and have more immortal state cultivators under his command. However, although the heavenly way stone could help people break through from the great saint realm to the immortal state, it would take time. Moreover, there was a certain probability of failure. It did not mean that it would succeed. However, with the help of the blood ball, not only would the time needed to break through be greatly shortened, but the probability of breaking through would also be greatly increased. To put it simply, the blood ball had a feeling similar to the force of living beings. However, its ability was far from the same level as the force of living beings. It was just that they were somewhat similar. In order to allow more people to break through to the immortal state and become the power to fight against the seventh realm, the will of the heavenly way did not hesitate to slaughter the living beings of the entire continent. Standing in the air and looking down at the continent that had become a land of death, the will of the heavenly way's expression did not change in the slightest. Perhaps in his opinion, slaughtering the living beings of this continent was not a big deal at all. The lives of these people were similar to ants. As long as he could block the attack of the seventh realm, any sacrifice would be worth it. The lives of all living beings were not worth mentioning at all in the eyes of the will of the heavenly way. Slaughtering them was as simple as stepping on a few ants for the will of the heavenly way. It's still a little short. His gaze was indifferent as he said softly. As soon as his voice fell, the will of the heavenly way put away the blood ball and disappeared. Please add it to your collection. Please recommend it. Chapter 1595. Although it was only a small continent, there were definitely hundreds of millions of people living on it. Even so, the will of the heavenly way's face remained expressionless. Perhaps to him, sacrificing the lives of an entire continent was nothing. Heaven and earth were above all living things. If heaven wanted you to die, then you had to die. Therefore, the will of the heavenly way did not feel any guilt at all after massacring all the living things on this continent. Moreover, the will of the heavenly way did not stop after massacring all the living things on this continent. This was because the power of the blood orbs was not enough. Following that, the living things on 2 more continents were massacred by the will of the heavenly way. The living things on these 2 continents did not know what had happened, nor did they know what they had done wrong. In any case, they were massacred in an instant. After massacring all the living things on 3 continents, the will of the heavenly way finally had enough blood orbs. On the 7th mainland, dozens of the great sage gathered together. Yinyangzi, Xianyuan Songtao, Xianyuan Wudi, and the others were among them. With so many the great sage gathered together, the will of the heavenly way did not have to wait long before he appeared. Seeing the will of the heavenly way appear, everyone respectfully cupped their hands and bowed. Greetings, will of the heavenly way. In the face of everyone's greetings, the will of the heavenly way nodded slightly. Then, with a wave of his hand, a heavenly stone and a drop of blood appeared in front of everyone present. This time, the will of the heavenly way planned to raise the cultivation of 50 the great sage to the immortal realm. It wasn't that the will of the heavenly way didn't want all the great sage in the 7th wilderness to reach the immortal realm. It was just that there weren't enough heavenly Tao stones, so it could only let 50 people break through first. These 50 were chosen by the will of the heavenly way from the 7th wilderness. Among the many the great sage in the 7th wilderness, these 50 were the best in terms of cultivation, foundation, and combat strength. They had a higher chance of breaking through to the immortal realm. Everyone knew about the heavenly law stone, but they had never seen that drop of blood before. Of course, they would never have thought that those drops of blood were actually condensed from countless lives. In order to let these 50 the great sage break through to the immortal realm, the will of the heavenly way did not hesitate to slaughter 3 small continents and hundreds of millions of lives. It could be said that everyone broke through to the immortal realm at the cost of all lives. If they knew the truth, would they still choose to use this method to break through? Handing over the heavenly law stone and the drops of blood condensed from all lives, the will of the heavenly way said indifferently, "You can all go into seclusion here and try to break through to the immortal realm as soon as possible." In order to deal with the attack of the 7th realm, the will of the heavenly way had prepared a response. Hearing this, everyone present nodded in agreement. They didn't know about the 7th wilderness, But as the seal of the gate of the immortal realm was getting weaker and weaker, the battle between the two sides was getting closer and closer. In the palace of the seventh realm, Shao Chun did not need to worry about breaking the seal. Although he was the heir of the seventh realm, Shao Chen's current cultivation level was not enough to break the seal left by the will of the heavenly way. Only the true masters of the seventh realm, such as Luoli, had the ability to break the seal left by the will of the heavenly way on the gate of the immortal realm. It was estimated that the seal could be broken in half a year. Now, more than 3 months had passed, and the seal had indeed loosened a lot. In the seventh realm, Luoli and the others spent all their energy on breaking the seal. As for the others, they were also preparing for the upcoming battle. Without a doubt, once the seal on the gate of the immortal realm was broken, the war between the seventh realm and the seventh wilderness would definitely start instantly. Shao Chun was still immersed in cultivation every day. Apart from cultivation, he didn't seem to be interested in anything else. Compared to before, the current Shao Chun could no longer be described as hard-working. He was completely self-harming. Apart from cultivation every day, Shao Chun did not care about anything else at all. As usual, Shao Chun was cultivating in his cave residence. However, Yi Xiao took the initiative to visit him under Yu Shujin's lead. During the time in the seventh realm, Yu Shujin was basically in charge of receiving Yi Xiao. Yi Xiao also learned a lot about Shao Chun from Yu Shujin. For example, Shao Chun was once the first saint of the seventh wilderness, and Shao Chun had forcibly snatched the power of all living things from Yu Shujin. After knowing this, Yi Xiao couldn't help but feel a trace of curiosity towards Shao Chun. According to Yu Shujin, Shao Chun had changed too much. He was like a completely different person. For a person to undergo such a huge change, what exactly happened to him? Yi Xiao secretly wondered in his heart. Because he was very curious about Shao Chun, Yi Xiao came uninvited. When he heard the servant say that Yi Xiao and Yu Shujin had come to visit, Shao Chun didn't say much. He brought them to the main hall and looked at Yi Xiao indifferently. What's the matter? His attitude was really cold. Hearing this, Yi Xiao helplessly shook his head and smiled bitterly. It's nothing. I've come to the seventh realm as a guest, but I don't think I've had a drink with Brother Shao Chun. Today, I've specially come to drink with Brother Shao Chun. With that, Yi Xiao voluntarily took out a jar of wine from his storage ring. This wasn't ordinary wine. It was the most famous wine in the eighth wilderness. Tasted really good. Yi Xiao invited Shao Chun to drink. Then the three of them started drinking in Shao Chun's residence. However, Shao Chun didn't say much during the entire process. He only cared about himself and drank. His attitude towards Yi Xiao and Yu Shujin was also extremely indifferent. Yi Xiao was very curious about Shao Chun, so he approached Shao Chun. Moreover, they were both heirs of heirs. Among the same generation, there weren't many people who could catch Yi Xiao's attention. Yi Xiao took the initiative to befriend Shao Chun. After a few days, Yi Xiao would find Shao Chun to drink. At first, he was accompanied by Yu Shujin, but later on, Yi Xiao would also find Shao Chun by himself. As for Yi Xiao, although Shao Chun was cold, he didn't stop him. Gradually, the two became familiar with each other. However, Shao Chun's coldness made Yi Xiao feel helpless. This guy was really an ice cube. As he cultivated, he would drink with Yi Xiao from time to time. Just like that, 3 months passed in the blink of an eye. On this day, Luoli and the other strong cultivators of the seventh realm gathered in the main square of the seventh realm. Of course, Shao Chun and Yi Xiao were also present. The seal was about to be broken. Today, the realm master of the eighth realm would arrive with the other strong cultivators of the eighth realm. Therefore, Luoli and the others gathered here and waited. After all, the realm master of the eighth realm had come personally. Luoli couldn't stay idle. Begging for your collection, begging for monthly votes, begging for recommendations. Sword Master 8 Wilderness. Chapter 1596. The Realm Master of the 8th Realm had arrived in person. They did not have to wait for long before a starship slowly descended. This starship was different from all the starships Xiao Chun had seen before. Not only was there a huge difference in appearance, but more importantly, there was a huge difference in speed between the two. When he was in the North Star Realm, Xiao Chun had seen a lot of spaceships, but those spaceships in the North Star Realm could not be compared to this one. This starship had the ability to break through the void. In other words, this starship was at least 10 times faster than an ordinary starship. The distance between desolates was huge. Even the 7th and 8th desolates, which were adjacent to each other, were very far apart. The trans-realm transmission formation could no longer connect the two desolate. Therefore, to travel between the two desolates, one still had to rely on starship. However, ordinary starships were too slow to travel such a long distance. Therefore, this advanced starship, which could break through the void and send messages in the void, became the best means of transportation. However, a starship like this was extremely expensive to build. The cost of a starship like this was estimated to be comparable to 100 ordinary starships. They slowly landed on the main square. Then, one by one, the powerhouses of the 8th Realm appeared on the starship. This time, the Realm Master of the 8th Realm had brought about 500 experts from the 8th Realm. Although there were not many of them, each of them could be said to be an expert among experts. As the experts from the 8th Realm appeared, finally, a beautiful young woman in a red dress slowly walked down the starship, accompanied by an equally good-looking girl. This young woman in red was the Realm Master of the 8th Realm. Her name was Red Lotus. In the Hachibra Senkai, Red Lotus was the only female Realm Master. However, this woman was not to be underestimated. Her strength was definitely not weaker than any of the 8 Hachibra Senkai Realm Masters. As for the girl standing beside Red Lotus, she was Red Lotus' daughter, Red Beauty. She was like a princess in the 8th field. Even Yi Xiao, the heir of Kunlun's field, loved her dearly. He didn't expect Hong Lian to bring her daughter. However, Luoli didn't say anything about it. He took the initiative to welcome them with a gentle smile. Long time no see. Luoli and Red Lotus naturally knew each other. Hearing Luoli's words, Red Lotus smiled charmingly and said, "What? Do you miss me?" Hong Lian's words were full of temptation, but Luoli did not have any other thoughts. Luoli knew Hong Lian's personality very well. In Hachibra Senkai, many people privately called her the Black Widow. Although Hong Lian was a beautiful woman and could tempt men with a few words, if you really had any thoughts about her, you would not be far from death. Rumor had it that Red Lotus had killed her husband, Hongxiu's biological father. Therefore, this woman was like a poisonous rose. Although she looked extremely alluring, she was actually extremely dangerous. Therefore, hearing Hong Lian's words, Luoli smiled and shook his head without thinking. "You must be joking. I don't dare to have any thoughts about you." Hearing Luoli's words, Hong Lian covered her mouth and giggled. Her every frown and smile was indeed indescribably beautiful. At least, many experts from the 7th field were dazed by her. Facing Hong Lian, apart from those who were familiar with her, there were only 2 people who could remain calm and unaffected. One was Luoli and the other was Xiao Chun. Standing in front of the crowd, they only glanced at Hong Lian for a moment before withdrawing their eyes and no longer paying attention to her. For Xiao Chun, although Hong Lian was indeed fatally attractive to men, Xiao Chun did not dare to be interested in her at all. Therefore, he naturally treated her coldly. However, apart from Xiao Chun, the 7th field's geniuses beside him, including Yu Shujin, were all stunned when they saw Hong Lian covering her mouth and giggling. There was a trace of infatuation on their faces. Seeing that Xiao Chun was not tempted by her realm lord, Yi Xiao looked at Xiao Chun curiously. This was the first time Yi Xiao had seen someone treat Hong Lian so coldly. Xiao Chun's indifference made Yi Xiao curious. At the same time, It also attracted Hong Lian and Hong Xiu's attention. Hong Lian just glanced at Xiao Chen calmly, but Hong Xiu kept staring at Xiao Chen curiously, as if she wanted to see through him. After a burst of laughter, Hong Lian, Luo Li, Xiao Chen, Yi Xiao, Hong Xiu, and dozens of experts from the two realms entered the hall together. As for the others, they were arranged to rest. In the hall, the real experts of the two realms sat opposite Luo Li. Hong Lian said with a chuckle, "The 8th wilderness has now arrived at the 7th wilderness. Therefore, this battle will not go smoothly." The 8th wilderness mentioned by Hong Lian was naturally the 8th wilderness's will of the heavenly way. Sensing that Hong Lian was leading people to the 7th wilderness, the 8th wilderness also led its experts to the 7th wilderness. Clearly, they wanted to work together to resist the attack of the two realms. Hearing Hong Lian's words, Luo Li smiled indifferently. "It doesn't matter. Let them come. There will be a battle sooner or later anyway." He did not care about the 8th wilderness's actions. Now that the seal of the gate of the immortal region was about to open, the experts of the two realms could directly enter the core of the 7th wilderness. Seeing that Luo Li did not care about the 8th wilderness, Hong Lian smiled and looked at Xiao Chen. This was the first time she had met Xiao Chen, but she could sense Xiao Chen's cultivation. She could confirm Xiao Chen's identity without much guessing. He had such a cultivation at such a young age and formed a heavenly immortal mansion. He could only be the heir of the 7th realm. Although she did not know when Luo Li had appointed Xiao Chen as the heir of the 7th realm, Hong Lian was still very curious about Xiao Chen. From the beginning to the end, Xiao Chen had not looked at her at all. This coldness was definitely not an act. He truly did not care. Xiao Chen did not care about her at all. He did not have any other thoughts. He was so calm at such a young age. Hong Lian could not help but be curious. She looked at Xiao Chen with a charming smile. She deliberately teased Xiao Chen. "The heir of the 7th realm and a handsome guy. Little brother, what's your name?" Facing Hong Lian's teasing, Xiao Chen's expression did not change at all. He replied indifferently, "Xiao Chen. Please add, vote, recommend." Chapter 1597. In the face of Red Lotus's teasing, Xiao Chen's attitude was extremely cold. Red Lotus's eyes flashed with interest. In all these years, Red Lotus hadn't seen many young people who could resist her charm. Of course, the older generation of strong people like Luo Li were no exception. After all, they were very mature and could control their emotions. However, there weren't many young people like Xiao Chen who could do this. At least, Red Lotus hadn't met anyone like him. Her smile became more charming. She turned to Luo Li and smiled. "This little guy is not bad. Luo Li, how about we trade and let Yi Xiao be the heir of the 7th realm? You can give me Xiao Chen. How about that?" With that, Red Lotus turned to Xiao Chen and smiled charmingly. "Little guy, come with me to the 8th realm. It's much more interesting than the 7th realm." Hearing this, Luo Li smiled bitterly. As for Xiao Chen, he said indifferently, "Not interested." Xiao Chen's indifferent attitude made Red Lotus more and more interested. Of course, Luo Li and the strong people of the 7th realm knew Xiao Chen's personality. They didn't feel anything other than a little helplessly. What needed to be said had been said. Next, they only needed to wait for the seal of the gate of the immortal region to be lifted. Then, the strong people of the two realms could attack the 7th wilderness. According to the current progress, the seal of the gate of the immortal region would be successfully lifted in a few days at most. Seeing that there was nothing else, Xiao Chen stood up directly. He looked at Luo Li and said, "If there's nothing else, I'm leaving." It seemed that he was asking for Luo Li's opinion, but before Luo Li could reply, Xiao Chen stood up and strode out of the palace. He was doing things his own way. Plus, everyone present was the higher-ups of the two realms. They were true strong people. Even so, Xiao Chen didn't care at all. Watching Xiao Chen leave, the smile in Red Lotus' eyes grew wider. She thought to herself, what an interesting little guy. Just like her mother, Hongxiu, who was sitting next to Yi Xiao, had been observing Xiao Chen from the very beginning. At this moment, she was also very interested in Xiao Chen. Xiao Chen left. Soon, Red Lotus, who wasn't with her mother, followed Yi Xiao. Facing Yi Xiao, the heir of the Eighth Realm's heir, Red Lotus didn't give him any face. That Xiao Chen, are you familiar with him? Hongxiu did not show the slightest bit of respect towards Yi Xiao. Of course, this was also because of Hongxiu's status. Hongxiu was Hong Lian's daughter, while Yi Xiao was Hong Lian's disciple. Thus, to Hongxiu, Yi Xiao was like an older brother, and had always doted on her. Hearing this, Yi Xiao smiled helplessly. It's all right. But Xiu, I have to remind you that it's best not to provoke him. He's a madman. Yi Xiao didn't dare to say that he knew Xiao Chen's temper very well, but he knew a little about it. He knew that this guy was a madman. He was the kind who would draw his sword and kill people at the slightest disagreement. Therefore, Yi Xiao didn't want Red Lotus to have too much contact with Xiao Chen. Yi Xiao knew Red Lotus's personality very well. To put it bluntly, she was just a little unruly. After all, she was Red Lotus' daughter. Although she wasn't an heir of the Eighth Realm, she had been spoiled since she was young. Therefore, it was inevitable that she would be unruly and willful. To other people, this kind of unruly personality might not be a problem. After all, they wouldn't say much for Red Lotus's sake. But Xiao Chen was different. This guy couldn't be judged by common sense. Who knew if Red Lotus would anger Xiao Chen because of what she said and directly draw his sword to kill him? Therefore, Yi Xiao didn't want Red Lotus to have too much contact with Xiao Chen. However, Red Lotus didn't listen to Yi Xiao's warning at all. Like her mother, Red Lotus was very curious about Xiao Chen. Especially Xiao Chen's temperament. It was a little evil and a little cold. Red Lotus couldn't help but want to know more about him. Completely ignoring Yi Xiao's words, the two of them returned to their residence together. Red Lotus didn't live with her mother. In order to break the seal of the gate of the immortal realm as soon as possible, Red Lotus and the other strong cultivators of the Eighth Realm also joined the camp of breaking the seal. If the strong cultivators of the two realms worked together, the seal of the gate of the immortal realm would definitely break much earlier. Red Lotus was busy with the gate of the immortal realm, so Red Lotus naturally had to be taken care of by Yi Xiao. Before the gate of the immortal realm opened, the young talents like Yi Xiao and Xiao Chen didn't have much to do. After all, they couldn't help much in breaking the seal. After resting for a day in the seventh realm, Red Lotus planned to find Xiao Chen the next morning. She told Yi Xiao her idea. Hearing that Red Lotus wanted to take the initiative to find Xiao Chen, Yi Xiao's first reaction was to shake his head and refuse. No, Xiao Chen is a madman. Don't provoke him. Yi Xiao shook his head like a rattledrum. He firmly opposed Red Lotus getting close to Xiao Chen. What a joke. Others might be afraid of Red Lotus's identity, but as far as Yi Xiao knew, Xiao Chen obviously wouldn't. Once Red Lotus angered him, Xiao Chen would definitely draw his sword and kill him, no matter who he was. He chose to refuse without hesitation. Seeing this, Red Lotus's unruly temper flared up. She immediately decided to go by herself. Since Yi Xiao didn't agree, she would go find Xiao Chen alone. Yi Xiao was really speechless in the face of Red Lotus's unruly behavior. In the end, Yi Xiao had no choice but to take Red Lotus to Xiao Chen's cave residence. Early in the morning, Xiao Chen was still immersed in cultivation as usual. Half a year of hard cultivation was almost like self-torture. In half a year, Xiao Chen's improvement was obvious to all. The 2 second-grade immortal skills, the 9 Serenity Sword technique and the Heavenly Star Step, had been cultivated to the initial stage by Xiao Chen. Cultivating 2 Grade 2 immortal skills to the rudimentary stage in half a year could be said to be ridiculously fast. It was even to the extent that even Yi Xiao would find it difficult to accomplish. Of course, Yi Xiao couldn't cultivate so hard like Xiao Qin. To put it bluntly, there were probably not many people in the world who could persist in cultivating like Xiao Qin, which was almost like self-torture. Just as he was cultivating the 9 Serenity Sword technique, a maid hurried in and bowed respectfully to Xiao Qin. Yi Xiao and Red Lotus have come to visit. Yi Xiao and Red Lotus had arrived. Seeing this, Xiao Qin slightly exhorted them. Then, he said flatly, "Bring them here. Begging for your collection, begging for monthly votes, begging for recommendations." Chapter 1598. Xiao Qin didn't refuse Yi Xiao and Hong Xiu's visit. Upon hearing this, the maid nodded respectfully and quickly left the courtyard. Not long after, Yi Xiao and Hong Xiu arrived at the courtyard under the maid's lead. Xiao Qin sat in the gazebo in the courtyard. Yi Xiao's eyes were filled with bitterness, but Hong Xiu's eyes were smiling. For some reason, Hong Xiu was filled with curiosity when facing Xiao Qin. They walked all the way to the gazebo and were familiar with Xiao Qin, so Yi Xiao spoke first. "Brother Xiao Qin, I'm here to drink with you again." Unlike usual, Yi Xiao's voice was filled with helplessness. Yi Xiao usually came alone, so it wasn't a big deal for him to drink with Xiao Qin. However, it was different this time because Hong Xiu was beside them. To be honest, Yi Xiao was really worried that Hong Xiu's unruly character would anger Xiao Qin. If that happened, things would be really difficult to deal with. Indeed, what one feared would happen. Before Yi Xiao could finish speaking and Xiao Qin could reply, Hong Xiu spoke first. "Hey, you're Xiao Qin, the 7th Realm's heir? You're as cold as an ice cube." To be honest, Hong Xiu was very beautiful. At least, she was on the same level as Qin Shuru and the other 3 girls. However, as soon as she said that, Yi Xiao was speechless and thought helplessly. "My lady, aren't you just looking for trouble? I told you not to provoke that lunatic Xiao Qin. Why are you speaking like this the moment you arrive?" Yi Xiao glared at Hong Xiu worriedly. Then, he sneaked a glance at Xiao Qin. Seeing that Xiao Qin's expression didn't change, Yi Xiao was relieved. He was afraid that Xiao Qin would draw his sword and kill him in a fit of rage. However, it was apparent that Yi Xiao was overthinking things. Xiao Qin had no intention of paying attention to Hong Xiu at all. He chose to ignore her. In Xiao Qin's opinion, there was no need to be calculative with a little girl like Hong Xiu. Therefore, Xiao Qin didn't care about her at all. Seeing that she was being ignored by Xiao Qin, Lady Hongxiu's unruly character naturally came out in an instant. She pouted her lips and looked at Xiao Qin with a displeased expression. "Hey, you're so rude. I'm talking to you. Didn't you hear me?" As the little princess of the 8th realm, Hong Xiu's status was naturally extremely high. Besides, she was doted on by everyone since she was young. When had she ever been ignored like this? She scolded in dissatisfaction. But even so, Xiao Qin continued to ignore her. He looked at Yi Xiao and said indifferently, "If you don't want to drink, you can leave." Yi Xiao began to chase him away. Hearing this, Yi Xiao nodded repeatedly and said, "Brother Xiao Qin, please forgive me. Another day I will invite you again." Afraid that Hong Xiu would anger Xiao Qin, Yi Xiao wanted to leave. But before he finished his sentence, Hong Xiu interrupted him. "Why aren't you drinking? Let's drink." How dare he ignore me? Humph, she thought sulkily. As soon as she finished speaking, she sat down beside Xiao Qin. Looking at Hong Xiu's behavior, Yi Xiao almost went crazy. This little girl really won't shed tears until she sees the coffin. Besides, Yi Xiao couldn't figure out why Hong Xiu was so interested in Xiao Qin. With Hong Xiu's character, she would never get close to others in the 8th realm. Except for himself and Red Lotus, Hong Xiu would always be indifferent to others. Strange. It was really strange. But now that Hong Xiu had sat down, Yi Xiao couldn't say much. He could only smile at Xiao Qin embarrassedly. Haha, brother Xiao Chen, Hong Xiu is a little unruly. Please don't mind her. It was a warning to Xiao Chen. However, Xiao Chen didn't answer. He didn't even look at Hong Xiu. Seeing that Xiao Chen was silent, Yi Xiao took out 3 jars of wine from his storage ring. Then, Xiao Chen didn't stand on ceremony. He directly picked up a jar and drank. Yi Xiao was already used to drinking with Xiao Chen. Basically, Xiao Chen didn't talk. It was the same every time they drank. However, for Lady Hongxiu, having to deal with a taciturn person like Xiao Chen really made her very unhappy. Seeing Xiao Chen continue to drink his wine, Lady Hongxiu pouted and grumbled. Hey, big ice cube, why aren't you talking? Hongxiu took the initiative to speak. However, she was met with silence. Xiao Chen ignored her and continued to drink as if he didn't hear her at all. Xiao Chen had completely ignored Hong Xiu from the beginning to the end. This made Hong Xiu even more unhappy. However, she didn't know why, but when she saw Xiao Chen drinking, she actually felt a sense of pity for him. With his snow-white hair and scarlet eyes, Xiao Chen gave off a lonely feeling when he drank. In fact, over the past 6 months, Xiao Chen liked drinking very much. He also liked the feeling of getting drunk. Therefore, most of the time, Xiao Chen didn't deliberately use his spiritual power to dissolve the alcohol in his body. This was because only when he was drunk could Xiao Chen feel that Qin Shuru and the other 3 girls were still by his side. After learning about Qin Shuru and the other 3 girls, as well as his parents' background, Xiao Chen often used the alcohol to numb himself and make himself feel better. It was only when he was drunk that Xiao Chen seemed to be able to sense the auras of Qin Shuru and the other 3 women and feel that they were still around him. Without saying a word, Xiao Chen drank in silence. As he drank more and more, Xiao Chen's eyes gradually blurred. His eyes, which were originally emotionless, actually revealed a touch of gentleness at this moment. Yi Xiao was already used to this change in Xiao Chen. However, Hong Xiu was different. When she noticed the gentleness in Xiao Chen's eyes, Hong Xiu's heart trembled. She didn't know why, but a different feeling grew in her heart. To Hong Xiu, Xiao Chen was like a mystery. She couldn't help but want to get closer to him and understand him. Looking at the gentleness in Xiao Chen's eyes and sensing the loneliness emanating from Xiao Chen, Hong Xiu didn't know why, but she was completely attracted to him. Her cheeks unconsciously blushed. As she watched Xiao Chen drink, Hong Xiu unconsciously became infatuated. Without caring about Hong Xiu's gaze, Xiao Chen drank 3 jugs of wine in a row. Then, he stood up and said to Yi Xiao calmly, "That's enough." After saying that, he didn't wait for Yi Xiao to reply. He directly stood up and walked out of the courtyard. He really left as soon as he said that. However, at this moment Hong Xiu, who had been staring at Xiao Chen the entire time, suddenly said, "Xiao Chen, I've taken a liking to you. Begging for your collection, begging for monthly votes, begging for recommendations." Chapter 1599. Xiao Chen, I've taken a liking to you. Hongxiu's sudden words caused Yi Xiao, who had just taken a sip of wine, to spit it all out. He then looked at Hongxiu in disbelief. What? This little girl was really good at shocking people. She stared at Xiao Chen for a while before saying such a thing. Of course, what Yi Xiao didn't know was that Hongxiu wasn't joking when she said those words. She really had feelings for Xiao Chen. Or rather, it could be said that Xiao Chen was the most attractive person she had ever met. Perhaps she didn't have any feelings for Xiao Chen, but she definitely had a good impression of him. Hongxiu was the type of girl who dared to love and hate, so she directly said it out loud. From Hongxiu's point of view, if she liked someone, there was no need to hide it. As for whether they could fall in love, that was a matter for the future. In any case, Hongxiu had a good impression of Xiao Chen right now. A little girl who dared to love and hate. Although she was a little unruly, it had to be said that Hongxiu's personality was actually quite good. Unfortunately, after hearing Hongxiu's words, Xiao Chen didn't even stop walking. He immediately walked away. Xiao Chen really didn't want to think about whether he liked someone or not. Or rather, Xiao Chen's heart couldn't hold anyone else right now. Xiao Chen directly left. Yi Xiao had a look of surprise on his face. As for Hongxiu, she waved her little fist cutely and said with a serious face, "Xiao Chen, you can't escape from the palm of my hand." Looking at Hongxiu's appearance, it was obvious that she wouldn't give up on Xiao Chen. Seeing this, Yi Xiao's face darkened as he said, "Crazy. You're completely crazy." He had only met Xiao Chen twice, but Hongxiu actually said that she had taken a liking to Xiao Chen. This was simply ridiculous. However, with Hongxiu's personality, since she had decided on something, Yi Xiao couldn't do anything to change her mind. Although this little girl was usually unruly and willful, she was actually very stubborn. She had been like this since she was young. Once she decided on something, it was very difficult to change her mind. Who would have thought that the result would be like this? This little girl actually took a liking to Xiao Chen. Yi Xiao was helpless. At the same time, he expressed his deep concern for Hongxiu's future. Judging from Xiao Chen's attitude just now, it was obvious that he was not interested in her at all. This was what they meant by the saying, "Falling flowers fall in love with the heartless brook, but the heartless brook." However, Beauty Hongxiu did not mind at all. Looking at the little girl's expression, she had made up her mind. She originally thought that it was just a simple matter of bringing the little girl here to see Xiao Chen. But in the end, things turned out like this. Xiao Chen left. Not long after, Yi Xiao also left with Hongxiu. However, when they left, Yi Xiao's expression was as ugly as it could be. At night, Yi Xiao was in his cave in the 7th realm. Hong Lian was also present. The three of them sat together and looked at Hong Lian. Yi Xiao was completely speechless. Hong Lian had been busy breaking the seal of the gate of the immortal domain. Today, she specially came to see Hongxiu. However, when she saw her mother, the first thing Hongxiu said was, "Mother, I have taken a liking to Xiao Chen." She wasn't reserved at all. Upon hearing this, Yi Xiao almost spat out a mouthful of blood. How valiant! However, Yi Xiao didn't expect Hong Lian's answer to be even more valiant after hearing his daughter's words. She thought that with Hongxiu's status, the man she liked couldn't be simple. Although Xiao Chen was the heir of the 7th realm, Hong Lian probably didn't like him. But who would have thought that after hearing Hongxiu's words, Hong Lian would smile and say without thinking, "My dear daughter has good taste. Mother also thinks that Xiao Chen is very good." Yi Xiao was completely speechless when he heard Hong Lian's words. Like mother, like daughter. She had no intention of stopping Hongxiu at all. She even actively encouraged Hongxiu to pursue Xiao Chen. Hearing her mother's words, Lady Hongxiu smiled and said, "Isn't that so? I told you that my taste can't be wrong. But mother, that Xiao Chen is so cold. He didn't even acknowledge me when I was with him today." After the initial excitement, Hongxiu started acting coquettishly to Hong Lian. It was because Xiao Chen was too cold to her, which made Hongxiu very unhappy. Hongxiu had always been the center of attention in the 8th realm since she was young. Many experts in the 8th realm doted on her like a little princess. However, in front of Xiao Chen, Hongxiu was like an invisible person. She couldn't attract Xiao Chen's attention at all. Hearing Hongxiu's words, Hong Lian gently patted the little girl's head and smiled. "Sure, men are like rocks. They're cold at the start, but as long as you warm them up, things will be done. Moreover, my Xiu'er is so beautiful. Is there any man in the world who can escape from my Xiu'er's palm?" Hongxiu's eyes revealed a look of confidence when she heard Hong Lian's words. She nodded heavily and said, "Yes, mother, don't worry. Xiao Chen won't be able to escape from my palm." Yi Xiao didn't know how to describe his current mood when he heard the conversation between the mother and daughter. What a strange pair of mother and daughter. Yi Xiao didn't have any special thoughts about Hongxiu. After all, the two of them grew up together. To Yi Xiao, Hong Xiu was more like a younger sister. They were so close that he didn't have any romantic thoughts. Therefore, Yi Xiao wasn't jealous that Hong Xiu liked Xiao Chen. He didn't have any other thoughts. The only thing that gave Yi Xiao a headache was Xiao Chen's personality. With Xiao Chen's personality, Hong Xiu would definitely like someone like him. From Yi Xiao's point of view, Xiao Chen probably wouldn't like Hong Xiu. Therefore, Hong Xiu was just useless. However, Xiu Hongxiu did not think so. Over the next few days, Xiu Hongxiu went to see Xiao Chen almost every day. Even though Xiao Chen ignored Xiu Hongxiu, the little girl seemed to have made up her mind and insisted on following Xiao Chen around. Sometimes, when Xiao Chen didn't speak for an entire day, Hong Xiu would also accompany Xiao Chen for the entire day. She would just look at Xiao Chen like that. It seemed like she was also very happy. She was completely crazy. Under Hong Xiu's relentless pursuit, 3 days passed. On this day, the seal on the gate of the immortal realm was finally broken. A silver-white light gate appeared in the main square of the Black Palace. This light gate was the entrance to the 7th realm. Through the gate of the immortal domain, the experts from the 7th realm and the 8th realm could reach the 7th realm without any obstructions and enter the hinterland of the 7th wilderness. Begging for collection, begging for monthly votes, begging for recommendations. Chapter 1600. The seal of the gate of the immortal realm was finally broken. With that, the atmosphere in the 7th realm gradually became tense. Everyone knew that once the seal was broken, a great war would break out. The 7th realm and the 8th realm would join forces to attack the 7th wilderness. However, it was said that the will of the heavenly way from the 8th wilderness had also arrived in the 7th wilderness. Everyone was making their final preparations. Everyone knew that such a battle would be incomparably fierce, and anyone could fall in it. No matter what your cultivation was or how strong your combat power was, you could die in such a great war. Therefore, in the face of such a great war, no one was allowed to be careless. Xiao Chen was like everyone else. He was making his final preparations for the upcoming war. However, besides that, the killing intent in Xiao Chen's heart grew stronger as the war approached. At night, Xiao Chen sat alone at the top of the mountain in his cave residence, drinking wine. In Xiao Chen's cave residence, there was a snow mountain that was not very high. It could be said that this was Xiao Chen's favorite place to come. Whenever he was upset or missed Qin Shuru and the other 3 girls, Xiao Chen would come here alone. However, it was different this time. In addition to Xiao Chen, the little girl Hongxiu was also by his side. She had almost completely become Xiao Chen's follower. Basically, wherever Xiao Chen was, Hongxiu would follow. On the top of the snow mountain, Xiao Chen ignored Hongxiu. He drank alone, holding the necklace in his hand. This necklace could be said to be more precious than Xiao Chen's life. This necklace was condensed from the remnant souls of Qin Shuru and the others. It was also their only hope of resurrection. Compared to his usual self, Xiao Chen looked even more desolate and lonely at the moment. The seal of the gate to the immortal region had been broken. Next, it was time to face the old friends of the 7th wilderness. Moreover, Xiao Chen was now the heir of the 7th world. Without a doubt, he was on the opposite side of the 7th wilderness. They were enemies. He thought of Xian Yuanling, Long Qing, Yinyangzi, Xiao Sheng, and other people who used to be familiar with him. He wondered if everyone was doing well, and what did they think of him? Should he choose to believe in the will of the heavenly way like the wine Taoist and feel that he was an unpardonable beast, or should he choose to believe in himself? Xiao Chen was a little confused, but one thing was certain. No matter what everyone thought, even if they thought that he was worse than a pig or a dog, Xiao Chen would not change his decision. He thought of his old friends in the 7th wilderness. Speaking of which, the 7th wilderness was his hometown. But now, as the heir of the 7th world, Xiao Chen was going to attack his hometown. It was indeed a bit mocking. Sensing that Xiao Chen was even more lonely than usual, Hong Xiu, who was standing beside him, spoke in a gentle voice, which she rarely did. If you don't want to go to the seventh wilderness, you don't have to go. I'll tell my mother that you don't have to participate in this battle. Hong Xiu had already heard from Yi Xiao that Xiao Chen had once been the first saint of the seventh wilderness. She thought that Xiao Chen couldn't bear to attack the seventh wilderness, so she spoke up. For some reason, when she sensed Xiao Chen's loneliness, she couldn't help but feel sorry for him. What did a man have to go through to be so lonely and desolate? After saying this, Hong Xiu didn't think that Xiao Chen would respond. After all, so many days had passed, and Xiao Chen had always ignored her. He treated her like she was invisible. But this time, Hong Xiu didn't expect Xiao Chen to speak up after she spoke. I just don't know how to face my old friends. This was the first time Xiao Chen had responded to Hong Xiu. Seeing this, Hong Xiu couldn't help but feel happy. She giggled and said, "Then don't go. I'll tell my mother that you can just stay in the seventh wilderness." Hong Xiu's thoughts were simple. Since Xiao Chen didn't know how to face his old friends in the seventh wilderness, then it was fine if he didn't participate in this battle. Anyway, Hong Xiu could tell Hong Lian. For Hong Lian's sake, Luoli wouldn't make things difficult for Xiao Chen. He knew that the girl meant well, but it wasn't in Xiao Chen's character to hide. Moreover, even if he didn't meet them this time, what about in the future? They would meet again one day. After taking a big gulp of wine, Xiao Chen said indifferently, "No need. I'll have to face them sooner or later." Some things couldn't be avoided, and had to be faced sooner or later. Whether his old friends believed in him or not, it didn't matter to Xiao Chen. Perhaps Xiao Chen might be affected by their attitude, but so what? Xiao Chen would still walk down the path he had to walk. Even if the whole world said that he was an unpardonable beast, Xiao Chen would still walk down the path as usual. It wasn't for anything else, but for that seemingly illusory glimmer of hope, the hope of reviving Qin Shuru and the others. Upon hearing Xiao Chen's words, Hong Xiu smiled and raised the wine pot in her hand. She smiled at Xiao Chen and said, "Hee, in that case, I'll reluctantly accompany you so that you won't be bullied when you're alone." Hong Xiu's smug expression when she said this was very cute. In fact, with Hong Xiu's quasi-sage great mastery cultivation, she wouldn't be of much use if she followed Xiao Chen. To put it bluntly, it wouldn't be good who would take care of who. However, Xiao Chen's heart still rippled when he heard this. He turned his head and looked deeply at Hong Xiu. This was the first time Xiao Chen looked at Hong Xiu. Facing Xiao Chen's gaze, especially Xiao Chen's pair of blood-red eyes, Hong Xiu's heart started to beat faster for some reason. A different kind of emotion also rose in her heart. Her pretty face blushed slightly. It was as if she was about to be sucked in by Xiao Chen's pair of blood-red eyes. However, just as Hong Xiu was secretly bashful, Xiao Chen just said indifferently, "I don't need a quasi-sage aunt to follow me." As soon as Xiao Chen said this, Hong Xiu naturally couldn't accept it. She pouted and said unhappily, "Humph, Xiao Chen, I'll catch up with you one day. Just you wait, I'll ask my mother to find me the power of all living beings. When I break through the immortal realm and condense the heavenly immortal mansion, I'll protect you." Hong Xiu said angrily. Xiao Chen didn't say anything about this. However, his impression of Hong Xiu had changed a little. How should he put it? Perhaps this unruly and willful little girl had gained Xiao Chen's approval. Xiao Chen didn't mind having such an unruly little girl by his side. Begging for collection, begging for monthly votes, begging for recommendation. Chapter 1601. Xiao Chen and Hong Xiu were drinking at the top of the snow mountain. Although Xiao Chen was still a man of few words and Hong Xiu was basically the only one doing the talking, Hong Xiu was still very happy. At least Xiao Qin was no longer ignoring her like before. What was to come would come, and what was to be faced would be faced. While Xiao Qian's mind was in turmoil due to the impending war, the will of the heavenly way on the seventh mainland had gathered all the experts in the seventh wilderness. Not only the immortal realm experts, but the great sage from the other 6 mainlands had also gathered on the seventh mainland. In addition to the experts in the seventh wilderness, the will of the heavenly way of the eighth wilderness had also led the experts from the eighth wilderness to the seventh wilderness. The Hachibra Senkai's goal was to overturn the heaven and earth's order. In this way, the will of the heavenly way of the eighth wilderness was naturally in an alliance. Therefore, the will of the heavenly way of the eighth wilderness naturally could not stand idly by when the seventh and eighth realms joined forces to attack the seventh wilderness. There were many experts from the seventh wilderness guarding the gate of the immortal realm. They would know immediately if there were any unusual movements. The atmosphere of war not only enveloped the seventh wilderness, but also the seventh wilderness. Moreover, compared to the seventh wilderness, the atmosphere in the seventh wilderness was heavier because they did not know when the seventh wilderness would attack. Now that the seal of the gate of the immortal realm had been completely broken, it meant that the gate of the seventh wilderness had been completely opened. The people of the seventh wilderness could attack whenever they wanted. Therefore, the pressure on the seventh wilderness was obviously greater. They were on high alert, ready to deal with the attack of the seventh wilderness at any time. Under such an oppressive atmosphere, Xianyuan Ling, Long Qing, Chen Yu, and the others who were once familiar with Xiao Qin gathered together in the Taiyang sect of the Heavenly Yin sect. Even the divine Emperor Tian Mushi and Long Yang were there. In half a year, everyone's cultivation had improved tremendously. Of course, this was all thanks to the will of the heavenly way. Among them, the Divine Lord Trio's cultivation had already reached the perfection stage of the second sage realm, while Long Qing, Xianyuan Ling, and Chen Yu's cultivation had also reached the perfection stage of the second sage realm. At this moment, everyone was gathered together. When they thought about the possibility of a big battle breaking out at any time, they couldn't help but think of Xiao Qin. They already knew that Xiao Qin was the heir of the seventh realm. At the mention of Xiao Qin, everyone was furious, including Xianyuan Ling and Long Qing. From their point of view, Xiao Qin had killed his father and wife, and had betrayed the seventh realm. This was the act of a traitor. He was the enemy of all living beings in the world, and everyone had the right to kill him. Because their memories had been altered by the will of the heavenly way, everyone hated Xiao Qin very much. Long Yang took a big gulp of wine and said coldly, "If I see Xiao Qin this time, I must ask him why he killed his father and wife. He's worse than a pig or a dog." Long Yang's words were full of hatred. Hearing that, Tian Mushi said coldly, "What's there to ask? Xiao Qin has already betrayed the seventh realm and even become the heir of the seventh realm. We've been enemies for a long time. It's a pity that Xiao Qin obtained the immortal crystal spirit vein and broke through to the immortal realm. Otherwise I would definitely kill him," the Divine Lord said. The three of them hated Xiao Qin to the extreme. Xianyuan Ling and Long Qing, Xiao Qin's eldest brother and second sister, also had strong hatred in their eyes when they mentioned Xiao Qin. In everyone's eyes, Xiao Qin was an unpardonable beast. He was the person of all living beings in the world. If they saw him in the future, he would be their enemy. If they had the ability, they would definitely kill Xiao Qin with their swords. Their hatred for Xiao Qin was unforgettable. Even Xianyuan Ling and Long Qing saw Xiao Qin as their mortal enemy. Xiao Qin didn't know how much everyone hated him. But even if he knew, he wouldn't change his mind. Under the arrangements of the will of the heavenly way, Xiao Qin had completely become a demon in the eyes of the world. He was the common enemy of all living beings in the world. Everyone had the right to kill him. Good and evil were only separated by a thought, and good and bad could only be determined by a sentence from the will of the heavenly way. If the will of the heavenly way said you were a demon, then you were a demon. You were the enemy of all living beings in the world. It was very sad, but no one could do anything about it. The night was silent. But on this night, whether it was the seventh wilderness or the seventh realm, it was extremely quiet. The next morning, when the sun had just risen, nearly 2,000 experts from the two realms had already gathered in the main square of the seventh realm's Black Palace. Everyone had received the order from Luoli and Hong Lian. Needless to say, everyone knew that it was time to march into the seventh wilderness. The experts from the two worlds had gathered together. Although there were only 2,000 of them, which was a drop in the ocean compared to the living beings in the seventh wilderness, they were not to be underestimated. After all, every single one of them had the cultivation of the immortal realm. Even the younger generation had the cultivation of the quasi-saint realm. Almost all the experts from the seventh realm and the eighth realm had gathered here. Besides Xiao Chen, Hong Xiu, the little girl, insisted on following them to attack the seventh wilderness. Originally, with Hong Xiu's cultivation, she couldn't join the attack on the seventh wilderness. After all, her cultivation was too low. In such a battle, she wouldn't be of much use. Even protecting herself would be difficult. However, Hong Xiu didn't know why the little girl insisted on following them. In the end, Hong Lian had no choice but to nod and agree. Being allowed to attack the seventh wilderness together, the one who felt the most pressure was definitely Yi Xiao. He couldn't let anything happen to Hong Xiu. Therefore, Yi Xiao had already thought about it. When the battle started, he wouldn't care about anything. He would only be responsible for Hong Xiu's safety. However, Hong Xiu didn't care about Yi Xiao's protection at all. In her eyes, there was only Xiao Chen. Moreover, Hong Xiu followed Xiao Chen closely from the beginning to the end. Seeing this, Yi Xiao felt helpless. Everyone gathered. Luoli and Hong Xiu stood at the entrance of the gate of the immortal realm. Looking at the huge light gate in front of them, Luoli didn't waste any time. He just said lightly, "Let's go." This battle was predestined. As soon as Luoli said this, many experts from the seventh realm and the eighth realm stepped into the gate of the immortal realm. Xiao Chen, accompanied by Hong Xiu and Yi Xiao, also strode into the gate of the immortal realm. After half a year, he returned to the seventh wilderness again. However, this time, Xiao Chen came as the heir of the seventh realm. He was facing his old friends as an enemy. Things had remained the same, but people had changed. He didn't know how they would feel when they met again. The former first saint of the seventh wilderness was now the heir of the seventh realm. He had long become a demon in the eyes of the world. Please add, vote, recommend. Sword Master 8 Wilderness. Chapter 1602. Who would have thought that one day, Xiao Chen would actually meet his old friends from the seventh wilderness as the heir of the seventh realm. Sighing silently in his heart, Xiao Chen still strode into the gate of the immortal domain without any hesitation. Just as Xiao Chen had always said, some things had to be faced sooner or later. There was no way to avoid them. Perhaps they would become enemies when they met again, but so what? Xiao Chen had no way out. Ever since the will of the heavenly way killed his entire family, Xiao Chen no longer cared what the world thought of him. Whether he was a demon or a beast, it did not matter. The cultivators of the seventh world and the eighth world stepped into the gate of the celestial area. At the same time, the cultivators of the seventh wasteland and the eighth wasteland were waiting around the gate of the celestial area. The moment the cultivators from the two realms entered the gate of the immortal domain, the cultivators from the seventh wilderness had already sensed it and responded immediately. The cultivators from the two wilderness gathered together. Among them were the Wine Taoist, Yinyangzi, Xianyuan Songtao, Xianyuan Ling, Long Qing, the Divine Lord, and other people who had once been close to Shaoqin. There were not many cultivators from the two wilderness. Similarly, there were less than 2,000 of them. After all, in a battle at the immortal realm, the tactic of numbers was useless. Those cultivators below the immortal realm would only be cannon fodder. They would only be slaughtered. They would not be of much use at all. Around the gate of the immortal domain, within an area of 10,000 miles, the will of the heavenly way from the seventh and eighth wilderness had already set up a huge formation. The only function of this formation was to isolate this space, so that when the two sides fought, other places would not be affected. Otherwise, with the destructive power of the immortal realm cultivators, the seventh mainland would probably be riddled with holes after a great battle. They had already made full preparations and were waiting for the cultivators from the seventh and eighth realms to arrive. They gathered around the celestial domain gate. While everyone was waiting, the celestial domain gate slowly opened. White light scattered in all directions, and one figure after another walked out of the celestial domain gate. The cultivators of the seventh realm and the eighth realm had arrived at the seventh continent through the celestial region gate. Unlike before, the two realms had sent out all their elites this time. With the arrival of the experts from the two worlds, the people from the seventh wilderness and the eighth wilderness looked extremely solemn. The wills of the heavenly way of the two wilderness, who were standing in front of the crowd, had a cold look in their eyes. Luoli, Red Lotus. The seventh will of the heavenly way said coldly as he gazed at the two leaders. Upon hearing Seventh Desolate's words, Red Lotus curled her lips and said, "What a grand lineup." Red Lotus swept her gaze across the cultivators of the two wilderness. Under her gaze, the cultivators from the two wilderness couldn't help but change their expressions slightly. It was just a glance, but it gave them tremendous pressure. This was the realm lord of the eighth wilderness, an existence comparable to the will of the heavenly way. Both sides faced each other, but at this moment Shao Chen, who was standing beside Luoli, saw Xianyuan Ling, Long Qing, and the others in the crowd at a glance. Although Shao Chen was mentally prepared, he couldn't help but feel a little nervous when he faced them again. After all, they were the closest people to him, especially Xianyuan Ling and Long Qing. The three of them were sworn siblings, and their relationship was naturally very deep. To be honest, deep down in his heart, Shao Chen hoped that everyone would believe him. After all, no one wanted to be misunderstood and wronged. He still had some hope that Xianyuan Ling and Long Qing would believe him. Unfortunately, this hope was destined to be impossible. Just as Shao Chen saw Xianyuan Ling, Long Qing, and the others, everyone also saw Shao Chen. Xianyuan Ling immediately shouted coldly, "Shao Chen, you killed your father and wife, betrayed the seventh realm, and now you still have the face to set foot on the land of the seventh wilderness?" Everyone's memories had been tampered with by the will of the heavenly way, so their hatred for Shao Chen was naturally extremely strong. Originally, there was still a trace of hope in his heart, but unfortunately, with Xianyuan Ling's words, Shao Chen knew that his hope was shattered. Looking at Xianyuan Ling and Long Qing, Shao Chen felt a deep sense of helplessness and sorrow. Even his eldest brother and second sister chose to believe in the will of the heavenly way. What else could Shao Chen say? Since everyone already thought that he had killed his father and wife and betrayed the seventh realm, there was no need for Shao Chen to explain anything. If you don't believe me, it's useless to say more. After taking a deep look at Xianyuan Ling and Long Qing, Shao Chen's blood-red eyes became indifferent again, without the slightest emotion. He didn't explain anything, nor did he say anything. Shao Chen was silent, but Hongxiu, who was on the side, shouted coldly at Xianyuan Ling at this time. "Humph, a group of hypocrites." Xianyuan Ling scolded Shao Chen angrily. Shao Chen didn't respond, but Hongxiu couldn't pretend not to hear. In Hongxiu's opinion, no one could insult Shao Chen. In the face of Hongxiu's scolding, Xianyuan Ling glanced at her coldly and didn't say anything. Then, he turned his gaze to Shao Chen and said coldly, "Shao Chen, from today onwards, you and I are no longer brothers." From now on, you are you, and I am me. We will no longer have anything to do with each other. Hearing Xian Yuanling's words, Xiao Chen's lips curled into a smile. However, no matter how one looked at it, this smile gave off a feeling of loneliness. Moreover, it wasn't just Xian Yuanling. After he said this, Long Qing and the others on the side also spoke one after another. That's right. From now on, I will no longer have anything to do with you. Me too. Me too. Xiao Chen didn't know that everyone's memories had been tampered with by the will of the heavenly way. No one could understand the bitterness in his heart as he watched the people who were once the closest to him sever ties with him one by one. He was a little sad, but more than that, he was disappointed and his heart was dead. His former brothers and friends now regarded him as an enemy. Perhaps only those who had experienced this personally would know how painful it was. Suppressing the sorrow in his heart, Xiao Chen looked at everyone indifferently and said faintly, "Okay." Since everyone wanted to sever ties with him, what else could he do? Did he have to explain himself? It was meaningless. In Xiao Chen's opinion, since everyone didn't trust him, any further explanation would be useless. As brothers, if they didn't believe him, then what was the point of him saying more? He took a deep look at Xian Yuanling and Long Qing. Perhaps from today onwards, the brotherhood between the three of them would come to an end. Begging for collection, begging for monthly votes, begging for recommendations. Chapter 1603. Xian Yuanling and the others all expressed their desire to sever ties with Xiao Chen. Although Xiao Chen felt bitter about this, he did not have the slightest intention to accept it. Xiao Chen remained expressionless as he looked at the indignant faces of the crowd. On the other hand, Hong Xiu, who was standing beside him, shouted angrily, "A bunch of ants! You are courting death. I will personally kill you all later." In Hong Xiu's opinion, Xian Yuanling and the others deserved to die for daring to insult Xiao Chen. No matter what Xiao Chen had done in the past, no matter what Xiao Chen's relationship with them was, since they dared to insult Xiao Chen, they deserved to die. It had to be said that Hong Xiu was very protective of Xiao Chen. She could not bear to see Xiao Chen suffer any grievances. Hong Xiu was so angry that she gritted her teeth. The killing intent in her eyes continued to gather. Seeing this, Yi Xiao looked helpless. He did not understand what was so good about Xiao Chen that Hong Xiu cared so much about him. Xian Yuanling and the others' attitude made Xiao Chen's last bit of hope disappear. However, what happened here did not have much of an impact on the situation on the battlefield. After all, the war was about to break out. The ones who had the right to speak were Luo Li, Hong Lian, and the two will of the heavenly way. The four of them were the true masters of this war. Only their wills could affect the entire situation. Ignoring Xian Yuanling and the others, Xiao Chen turned his gaze to the seventh will of the heavenly way. It was still the same familiar face. However, facing the will of the heavenly way, Xiao Chen's heart was filled with hatred and killing intent. It was because of the seventh will of the heavenly way that Xiao Chen's entire family had been killed. He was a complete hypocrite. In the eyes of all living beings, the will of the heavenly way was the voice of justice and the representative of heaven and earth. However, only Xiao Chen knew how despicable and cruel the will of the heavenly way was. Just because he had obtained the power of living beings and knew something that he should not know, the will of the heavenly way wanted to kill him. Moreover, he did not even spare his family. He wanted to kill this person immediately. However, Xiao Chen also understood that although he had obtained the power of living beings and formed the heavenly immortal mansion, there was still a huge gap between him and the will of the heavenly way. As if sensing Xiao Chen's gaze, the will of the heavenly way also turned to look at Xiao Chen. However, it was only a glance. Soon, the will of the heavenly way looked away. Not being able to kill Xiao Chen was indeed a pity for the seventh will of the heavenly way. However, so what? Shao Chen was now a traitor in the eyes of all living beings in the seventh wilderness. No one would believe Shao Chen's words. Therefore, killing Shao Chen was no longer important to the will of the heavenly way. Most importantly, Shao Chen was now the heir of the seventh realm and was protected by the seventh realm. If the will of the heavenly way wanted to kill Shao Chen, it would have to depend on Luo Li's permission. With Luo Li around, it would not be easy for the will of the heavenly way to kill Shao Chen. Moreover, in the face of the experts from the seventh and eighth realms, the will of the heavenly way was most concerned about Luo Li and Hong Lian. As for Shao Chen, although he was talented, he was not strong enough to affect the entire battle. Without paying too much attention to Shao Chen, the will of the heavenly way turned its attention back to Luo Li and Hong Lian. This battle was unavoidable, and the seventh wilderness could not afford to lose. Because if they lost, the entire seventh and eighth wilderness could be conquered by the Hachibra Senkai. When that happened, the fate of the two will of the heavenly way would be obvious. Without batting an eyelid, he signaled the will of the heavenly way. Then, two terrifying auras shot up into the sky from the two will of the heavenly way. As the auras of the two will of the heavenly way exploded, more than 10 white balls of light appeared out of thin air beside Luo Li and Hong Lian. Along with the emergence of the dozen or so white light balls, the seventh and eighth wilderness cast hand seals at the same time and bellowed in unison. Heaven's slaying ritual. In order to deal with the attack from the two realms, the seventh and eighth wilderness had made ample preparations. The heaven slaying formation was specially prepared for Luo Li and Hong Lian. It was a formation that surpassed the Saint tier and even the Immortal tier. The heaven slaying formation was one of the top formations. As soon as the formation was activated, Luo Li and Hong Lian were engulfed by it. The heaven slaying formation was a trapping formation that could trap Luo Li and Hong Lian. In this way, the powerhouses of the two wilderness could take the initiative to deal with the powerhouses of the seventh and eighth realms. The formation successfully trapped Luo Li and Hong Lian. But at this moment, the seventh and eighth wilderness didn't have it easy either. First of all, although the heaven-slaying formation was powerful, it consumed a lot of spiritual energy. Secondly, the seventh and eighth wilderness had to constantly inject spiritual energy into the formation during the operation of the formation. In other words, they couldn't leave the formation. But even so, after the heaven-slaying formation was activated, without the two realm lords, Luo Li and Hong Lian, it was obviously much easier to deal with the powerhouses of the seventh and eighth realms. Inside the heaven-slaying formation, Luo Li and Hong Lian were surrounded by a dazzling white light. Moreover, this layer of white light blocked their senses, so they didn't know what was happening in the outside world. Moreover, Hong Lian extended her hand and tried to break through the white light. She realized that it was difficult to break through even with her and Luo Li's strength. Hong Lian retracted her palm and didn't look too shocked. Instead, she said with a smile, "If we do this, we'll be trapped." Although Hong Lian said that, she didn't feel the slightest bit worried. Hearing this, Luo Li said calmly, "You don't have to do anything. Even if you trap us, the result won't change." It seemed that he wasn't worried about the battle outside at all, nor did he care that they were trapped in the formation. Hong Lian smiled slightly when she heard Luo Li's words. At the same time, outside the formation, after trapping Luo Li and Hong Lian, Seventh Wilderness said in a deep voice, "Okay, now we can slowly deal with the other powerhouses of the two realms." As he said that, he looked at the surrounding powerhouses. Without Luo Li and Hong Lian, he could slowly deal with the other powerhouses of the two realms. Hearing this, the powerhouses of the seventh and eighth wilderness all released their auras. At the same time, their eyes were filled with fighting spirit. Terrifying spiritual energy fluctuations soared into the sky. At the same time, the strong fighting spirit quickly spread. Looking at the powerhouses of the seventh and eighth realms, the powerhouses of the two wildernesses were filled with killing intent. Please collect, vote, recommend. Chapter 1604. First, they trapped Luoli and Honglian. Then, they would deal with the other experts from the 7th and 8th realms. Faced with the killing intent and terrifying auras of the people from the two desolates, the experts from the 7th and 8th realms were all filled with battle intent. At this moment, a middle-aged man from the 8th world stepped out. He radiated with an unparalleled domineering aura. He slowly glanced at the people from the two desolates and said coldly, "Since the Sector Lord has been trapped, I'll be in charge of this battle." The middle-aged man was called Huiyi. He was one of the 8 Grand Elders of the 8th world. His strength was only below Honglian and Luoli. Those who were familiar with Huiyi knew that before he joined the 8th world, he was the emperor of an empire in the 2nd Desolate. He was a true emperor. Therefore, his domineering aura could be said to be innate. Following Huiye's words, an old man from the 7th Wasteland shook his head and smiled bitterly. "How troublesome. I say, why don't you 2 wastelands join the 8 wastelands together? Why risk your lives for the will of the heavenly way?" The old man was one of the 8 Grand Elders of the 7th Desolate. In the entire Hachibra Senkai, the 8 Grand Elders were basically the same. Aside from the Sector Lord, the 8 Grand Elders were second only to the Sector Lord in terms of cultivation and battle prowess. Now that Luoli and Honglian were trapped, the 8 Grand Elders became the strongest people present. Hearing Huiyi and the old man's words, the people from the two desolates showed no signs of backing down. On the contrary, the killing intent in their eyes intensified. At the same time, the ripples of spiritual chi within them became even colder. It was impossible for them to back down. In the eyes of the people from the two desolates, the Hachibra Senkai was the enemy of all living beings. They wanted to defy the heavens and resist the will of the heavenly way, so they had to stop them. In the eyes of all living beings, the Hachibra Senkai was the embodiment of evil. Naturally, they would not back down and reconcile. The smile on the face of the elder who had spoken earlier became increasingly bitter when he sensed the increasingly dense killing intent from the people from the two desolates. He looked as if he was extremely unwilling to make a move. However, Huiyi coldly snorted and said, "An ant dares to compete with the bright moon? He's just courting death." With that, Huiyi glanced at the other experts from the 7th and 8th realms and shouted, "Kill all these lackeys of the heavenly Tao." As soon as he finished speaking, the experts from the 8th wasteland behind Huiyi responded in unison. Their feet moved at the same time, and they immediately charged toward the people from the two wastelands. The two sides immediately engaged in a fierce battle. Huiyi was indeed worthy of being a natural emperor. As the experts of the two realms took the initiative to attack, the people of the two desolate lands naturally could not wait for death. The two sides fought fiercely, and in almost an instant, various martial skills bloomed in the sky. In the beginning, it was only a battle between immortal realm experts. However, very quickly, several experts whose cultivation and battle prowess had already reached Huiye's level walked out. One of the experts from the 8th wasteland immediately locked onto Huiyi. The two of them were already old rivals. Looking at Huiyi, the expert from the 8th wasteland shouted in a deep voice, "Huiyi, today is the day you die." Shameless boasting. Hearing this, Huiyi coldly snorted and took a step forward. His figure instantly disappeared on the spot, and then the two of them engaged in a fierce battle. At Huiye's level, his strength was already extremely terrifying. Every move he made was enough to change the color of the sky and earth. Now, everyone present already knew that after the Great Saint Realm was the Immortal Realm. Above the Immortal Realm were the Immortal Sovereign Realm, the Immortal Emperor Realm, and the Immortal Emperor Realm. The Immortal Sovereign Realm was at the level of the Wine Daoist. Huiyi and the others were at the Immortal Emperor Realm. As for Luoli and Honglian, they were at the Immortal Emperor Realm. Reaching the immortal Emperor realm was enough to contend with the will of the heavenly way. Because today, the sky and earth could no longer suppress the experts at the immortal Emperor realm. They had transcended the sky and earth, and could even be said to be immortal. Therefore, the 8 sector lords of the Hachibra Senkai were all at the immortal Emperor realm. Each of them was not weaker than the will of the heavenly way. They could contend with the will of the heavenly way. The strength of the immortal Emperor realm could not be ignored. They had transcended the sky and earth, and were no longer suppressed by the sky and earth. As for the experts at the immortal Emperor realm, although their strength was far inferior to the immortal Emperor realm, they were still extremely powerful. As Hui Yi and the expert from the 8th Wasteland engaged in a fierce battle, the immortal Emperor realm experts from both sides also joined in the battle. On the side of the 2 wastelands, a sage-like old man looked at the old man from the 7th realm and said flatly, "Fine. Mu Luo, let's fight." The old man was also an immortal Emperor realm expert. He was a figure from the immemorial era of the 7th mainland. His strength was definitely enough to rank in the top 3 among the experts in the 7th wasteland. As for Mu Luo, he was one of the 8 great elders of the 7th realm. He was also the old man who had spoken earlier. Hearing the old man's words, Mu Luo still had a helpless bitter smile on his face. The 2 of them had already fought who knows how many times, and it was difficult to determine a victor. However, it seemed like today's battle was unavoidable. Mu Luo looked at the old man and said helplessly, "Old man, do you really want to fight? I've already said that the heavenly Tao is unfair. Joining the Hachibra Senkai is the best choice for you." Humph, what a glib tongue! Mu Luo's face was filled with helplessness. However, the old man snorted coldly and stretched out his hand. An inexplicable force spread out and surrounded Mu Luo in an instant. Then, it seemed like he was going to forcefully drag Mu Luo to his front. Mu Luo said helplessly, "Do you really want to fight? Isn't it better to sit down and have a drink and chat?" Mu Luo seemed like he really didn't want to fight. However, despite his words, he had already launched a palm attack. The 2 sides engaged in a fierce battle. At the same time, Xiao Chun and the other young experts also joined the battle. As soon as Hong Xiu came up, she went straight to Xianyuan Ling and Long Qing without any explanation. They were the ones who had cursed Xiao Chun earlier, and Hong Xiu had long been suppressing a ball of fire in her heart. She rushed towards Xianyuan Ling and the others and shouted angrily, "A group of ants dares to scold Xiao Chun? You're courting death." Seeing Hong Xiu's action, Yi Xiao and the other young geniuses of the 8th realm followed closely behind. They didn't dare to let anything happen to Hong Xiu. She was the little princess of the 8th realm. If anything happened to her, how could they call the realm lord? They didn't stop her, nor did they have time to care about Hong Xiu's actions. This was because Wine Taoist had already blocked their way in front of Xiao Chun. Begging for collection, begging for monthly votes, begging for recommendations. You're tuning in to the Phoenix Knights YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.